Welcome back to HPP, the podcast that covers college basketball and the NBA draft inside and out. I am Rich Harris, and thanks for joining us again. We're joined by Jake Copestick, our resident college expert, and today we're going to preview the American Athletic, the Atlantic 10, and the Conference USA conferences, and for basketball, of course. And before we do that, we're going to do our college notebook. Jake, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm tired. Football season's here. We're going to start playing NFL games tomorrow.
Right.
We're still in the middle of training camp. Been pulling really long days, really long weeks. But it's all fun stuff, and it's very hot outside. I almost sweat through every piece of clothing I had on today out in the heat in practice.
Yes.
So,
been very
hot.
warm, very warm these last few days. And I actually forgot that the NFL season is starting tomorrow. That's how much of basketball mode I'm in. So I never get out of basketball mode, actually. Top off the news. I think this is like the third episode in a row, but it just doesn't stop. And that's realignment. And I think this may be the most absurd change yet, but we saw it coming. We talked about it. I don't know if it was last episode or the episode before, but the ACC adds Cal, Stanford, and SMU. Your reactions, Jake?
So to piggyback off of what we've been saying and how it's not really fair to the student athletes, they have to travel that far, everything. Now it's like, okay, you're going to have Cal and Stanford now fly to Boston College, which I believe would be the farthest road trip. If you don't count Hawaii, that's got to be the farthest road trip that exists.
What about Miami of Florida? Miami of Florida's got to be pretty far too.
Yeah, you have to go down there too. So, yeah, it continues to perplex me because the ACC is adding these teams, bracing for the fact that probably Miami, Clemson, and Florida State are out the door pretty soon, and potentially North Carolina, which I think would be a diabolical move to go with football over basketball and potentially break up the Duke rivalry. So, still not, it just sucks for everybody involved, but this is where we live in right now. This doesn't make any sense to me. I don't think this is good for rivalries like we talked about last time. Good for, local rivalries for fans wanting to go to games. Like it's nobody wins here except people at the top line in their pockets, in my opinion. Yeah. So it sucks, but just the world we live in now.
Well, I actually think it's going to eventually backfire. I think college basketball needs to someone needs to save college sports, I should say, from itself. Right now, there's been battles in courts leading up to this, with television contracts and how much autonomy conferences could have. And, you could kind of understand that. But at the same time, it's gotten absurd. And, Cal and Stanford and SMU, for the general fan standpoint, your average fan who not an alum or, doesn't live near those schools, for one, even if you're an alum or whatever, you're probably not excited about it. And as an ACC fan, you're definitely not excited about it, But what's happening here is they just want to make the television contracts. They want to make their conference as attractive to people who are selling, buying their television contracts. And so now they can say, well, we have teams in California, we have a team in Texas. And, but basically what I think is going to have to happen, or college sports, is this going to implode and become nothing like what we have known it to be. I think they're going to have to make an agreement in order to save themselves, that we can't have this autonomy. Obviously we can't run this individually. We can't compete against each other like this. We have to act like the NFL and as one league. And then I think what you'll do is you'll probably, I'm hoping sense will prevail here. And eventually, I mean, this might be like 20 years down the road, but I'm thinking there might be an eventual total realignment, actually kind of going back to the way things were, maybe 10, 15 years ago. And they might put like a max on how many teams are allowed in a conference. They might put a max on how far teams have to travel, like a maximum distance, and totally realign things and act as a group with revenue sharing, as opposed to, right now the SEC and the Big Ten are running away with the big money. And then the Big 12's doing okay, and the ACC's bringing up the rear, and the Pac-12 just, evaporated. I think, and here's the thing, I've said this over and over. One thing that nobody talks about is there is no, in terms of rivalries or in terms of scheduling or in terms of enhancing the fan value, there's no advantages to these huge conferences because you can't play each other anyway. You can't play everybody in your conference. That's when you know it's too big. Mm-hmm. So the ideal number for both sports, basketball and football, is 12. You can play 22 regular season games in basketball against all your opponents. You can play them home and away. And you can play all 11 teams, in football. Now, you might say, well, football, that's kind of pushing it, 11 conference games. Okay. But so maybe 10 is the ideal number, actually. Then you definitely can do it. But I think any conference bigger than 12 is it's just nonsense. So, all right. I hate to go on and on about it. I'm actually, I've been researching alternatives and even looking into what do they call what level of football Villanova plays at now? It used to be 1A, but
it's technically they're double A. It's called FCS.
FCS double A. Okay, so it's Division I double A now, right?
Yes, well, it's FCS, but yes, you have like Alabama's D1 single A, Villanova's D1 double A.
Okay, cool. All right. So, I've even been looking at those conferences, because a lot of those conferences, a lot of those 2A teams are have respectable football programs, but they can't compete at the top level. And yet they are significant players in the basketball arena. And there is a way to group these teams to keep rivalries, to so everybody can play everybody and everybody could be happy. But they would have to. The people right now, there's a handful of people making mega bucks, and everybody else is kind of like in the poorhouse. There is a way, if they're willing, if those handful of people, if they're willing to, and I would think the majority would say, yeah, this makes sense. Let's do revenue sharing. And of course, like Jacksonville State wouldn't expect the same amount of money as Alabama, but it could be worked out to save college sports. All right. So moving down the notebook, it's looking good for Bronny James to eventually play for USC. We don't know when that will be, but apparently doctors have diagnosed it as a congenital heart problem, which is something he was born with. And apparently it can be, though they haven't gone into detail, apparently it can be managed. So any thoughts there?
Yeah, my only thought here, and it has nothing to do with basketball. I'm just happy that he's okay.
Yeah.
That's the more important thing here. USC, with or without him, is still going to be very good. They will obviously be better if he is on the court. Although they have some returners and some other high level guys coming in, Bronny James would definitely help them out. But that's totally besides the point here. The good thing is the young man's not going to have to retire from basketball. He's going to be able to keep playing. And hopefully that's this season. Hopefully he can be back on the court for them, because he's certainly going to be a guy that USC is going to play and maybe not rely on, because they have guys like Boogie Ellis coming back and Isaiah Collier coming in. But he's a guy that's going to play for them. If he's healthy enough to be on the court, Andy Enfield's going to put him on for sure. So glad that he's okay. Hopefully we can see him this season, because he'll definitely a lot of people were looking forward to him even before this getting on the court. And, they'll still be very eager to look at him as a potential pro down the road if everything goes well.
Right. Right. One of the more crazy stories of the offseason has been four-star freshman Marcus Adams. And I don't know if you have any insight here, but he just recently left his second school before he ever played a game. He committed to Kansas, then he committed to Gonzaga, and then he left Gonzaga, and now he's committed to BYU. What a journey. And so do you have any insight here? I thought I heard something about there was problems with his registration process at Gonzaga, like he was coming in too late. I haven't really seen a lot of detail on that. I just saw like some tweet or something, but that didn't make a lot of sense to me. It was like, really? You can't work this out?
Yeah, I don't have any insight here for you, but I mean it's not something that we haven't seen before. I think was it Dontrez Styles maybe, or DeMarco Dunn had committed. I think one of the North Carolina guys had tried to commit somewhere this year and then it didn't work out and it fell through. Think about Nojel Eastern.
Caleb Love was supposed to go to one of the big teams.
I think that might have been what it was, him going to Michigan. But also think about another guy going to Michigan. Think about Nojel Eastern trying to go there a couple years ago, and that whole thing kind of getting nixed. Like, it is late, and I get it. Like, athletes have the preferential treatment here, but at the same time, it is very late to be coming in. But then it doesn't make I don't know what the policy is for these schools whatsoever. I can't even begin to that's just not anything that I ever think about or would know. But then, he just kind of commits to BYU kind of, on the hop here. And he's going to have to play Kansas because now BYU is in the Big 12. So he's going to have to play. He's going to play. That's
right. Yeah.
That feels like forever ago. He's committed to Kansas, but he's going to have to play. But no, I wish I had some insight here for you, but fun little nugget there.
From his standpoint, he's probably at the best place he could be because he wasn't probably going to see much action at Kansas. He's probably wasn't going to play much for Gonzaga, but for BYU, I think he will play a lot. So yeah, and they could use the help in their first year in the Big 12. So another four-star guy, Dior Johnson. In fact, last year coming into Pitt, he was a top 40 recruit. He's a point guard, got in some trouble off the court, didn't play last year. I think he also may have been injured, I believe. And apparently he was all set to play this season and maybe even start for Pitt at point guard. And then all of a sudden, with no explanation, he was kicked out of Pitt. Apparently he went on their trip to Europe with them. And I assume something happened somewhere along the line, and he's gone, and no one's picked him up so far. That leaves Pitt with basically two options at point guard this year. That's either Ishmael Leggett, transfer from Rhode Island, or four-star incoming freshman Jalen Lowe. So Pitt was, counting on one of these three guys popping up and being a major force. And of course, they could have played a combination of the three in the backcourt, but that won't be happening.
Yeah, this is really, really confusing with all the schools that Dior Johnson has, first of all, attended at the high school level. And then you think he was at Syracuse and Oregon, was committed to both of those programs for a little bit, and then decommitted. Like, who even knows what you're getting, if he was to come in. And now he's got the off-the-court issues that sound like they're pretty troubling. I believe there's a domestic violence kind of thing going on there.
Yeah.
So, who knows if he'll play college basketball again. Number one, if he commits there, it doesn't sound like that's a sure thing. And then number two, if he's going to get in trouble off the court, things certainly aren't going to happen. So, yeah, just another, step in the long line of things here.
These guys, and I don't know if this applies to Marcus Adams, but generally, guys who go from program to program to program are just problem children, and they never make it in the pros, at least not in the NBA. It just doesn't work out because they can't. If you can't settle in at one place in school, you certainly don't have the discipline to become a pro. A high level pro.
Yeah.
And I see it, time after time too in Europe. Europe will give a chance to some of these high recruits that never quite worked it out at college, and they'll go play for a European team. Remember Marcus Watson went to Oklahoma State, and I think he went to Grand Canyon. He got signed this year by a team in Europe, and I actually know people who make decisions on that team, and I said, you're getting somebody here who can't, it's kind of a malcontent. And they're like, we know what we're doing. You know what? He lasted about a week and a half. So yeah, that's just what happens. Some people turn it around, but most don't. So by the way, another guy who got in trouble, another high-level freshman, was JoJo Hunter. He's not, I don't have him listed, but this is going way back to the spring. He got arrested, and at first Fresno said, he was going to be able to stay with the program. And then apparently, after they looked into the case a little more, they charged him, and I think he was jailed. And so Fresno booted him. So we got two 19-year-old incoming freshmen. And Hunter didn't play for Fresno last year because of injury. So got two guys that got in trouble in the offseason, both booted off their team, high-level recruits, and right now they don't have a home. And it's not that easy. When you think about it, some of these guys might be thinking, oh, I'll just go play in Europe. Well, let's talk about Talafali Leonard of Memphis. Remember, he decommitted, said he was going pro. He's still not signed by any pro team. Isaiah Mosley, who said he wasn't going to play his final year at Missouri because he was going pro, he's not signed by anybody. We're getting down to the nitty gritty. You know what I'm saying, in terms of signing. So not even like teams in Poland or Finland, low-level European leagues are looking at these guys. Or if they are, they're declining the offers. But not getting any bites. So Argentinian big man, 19-year-old incoming freshman Lee Ilia, I think is his name, is joining Michigan. He's 6'9", 6'10", big guy. And you'll see this. Gonzaga added a lot of European guys kind of are making that decision this summer. Do I want to go pro? Do I want to play in a U.S. college? And they are some of the last guys to join a roster. And some of them are really, really good players. And Leah, if I'm saying his name right, is one of those guys. So Michigan, once again, Michigan hasn't had a great year in terms of incoming recruits and freshmen. So this is kind of a big boost for them late in the game, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. A really, really big year for now. Really, really big year with no Hunter Dickinson, the Caleb Love move falling through. It did get Olivier Kamwa, but big year for Juwan Howard. Big year, because last year they were teetering. Were they in? Were they out? Slow. They finished. They kind of crawled to the finish line, as I like to say about teams that finished slow and ultimately didn't get in, and then they ended up losing in the NIT. It was the first game.
Eventually they beat Toledo in the first round, and I think they lost. But Howard, the son, the kid that was just drafted, he didn't play, and I think Dickinson played, but Howard was it, and I don't know if Kobe Bray or who am I thinking of? Kobe, Buffkin. I don't think he played either. So the guys that knew they were going pro decided to sit that out. But yeah, definitely an underachieving year for Michigan. I mean, I can remember last year, each week when we do our notebook, we'd be talking about teams that, should make the tournament, and aren't actually coming through. And Michigan was at the top of that list, and ultimately they didn't make the tournament. All right, so before we move on to our conference previews, we're going to roll an interview that I did with Max Fiedler, big man from Rice. They played in Conference USA last year and are now moving to the American this year. Max has a very unique game, and I was really excited to talk to him. Our special guest this week is Rice's fifth-year big man, Max Fiedler, a 2023 All-CUSA selection. Last season, Max led the nation in field goal percentage at 73.5. He also led Conference USA in assists per game at 5. He finished in the top 10 of the conference for rebounds per game, 7.6, blocks per game, 1.1, player efficiency rating, win shares, plus minus. And in terms of points and assists per possession, Max ranked at the 100th percentile, finishing second among 2,976 D1 players who had at least 100 possessions. Max, that was a mouthful. Welcome to the show. You're looking good. I see you trimmed up the beard a little bit for the summer.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. So how was your summer? How did you spend your time during the off season?
It was good, got a few weeks off in early May. Had graduated from Rice, which was exciting. Family Houston. Went home for a few weeks, just enjoyed some time away. And then I was back in Houston for the summer pretty much. Just here around, working out, looking forward to the season.
Right. Have you been watching much of the World Cup?
No, I haven't been watching too much of it.
Oh, you surprised me. And the reason I say that is I thought you would especially enjoy it because of European play. If I could describe the way your team plays, a lot of handoffs, a lot of screen action, a lot of pick and rolls with a high percentage of assisted baskets. Very European. Would you agree with that, my assessment of your offense?
Yeah, absolutely. You could definitely say that. I noticed a lot of the games are at like really, really strange times, so I just haven't.
Yeah, they're in Asia. They're in Japan, Philippines. So yeah, they start like at 4:30 in the morning. Yeah. So, but if you have ESPN Plus or Hulu, you can catch them on there. You can catch the replays. So
yeah, I'll have to tune in a little bit.
All right. So when I watch you play, by the way, speaking of the way your offense is set up, you set screen after screen and you bang down low with guys like Trey Jemison of UAB, who's now moved on to the pros. I suspect you take your share of ice baths, no?
Yeah, when I need to. That water's a little cold, but not in there a whole bunch, but some days you need it, and I'll hop in there.
Yeah, it's just I don't know. I just don't know if there's a guy in the country. I don't know if anyone counts, but I don't know if there's anyone who sets more screens than you.
Yeah, definitely set a good amount, but just it is what it is. That's all I know. Right.
So let's talk a little more about your game. It's somewhat unique. I would say, ironically, I don't know if you know him, but Kevin Cross of Tulane has a similar game, high percentage, big guy, very efficient down low. But typically you guys are, you just don't see big men leading their team in assists. So, like I said, you led the country in field goal percentage, you led the CUSA in assists, and 100th percentile in terms of points and assists per possession. Oh, I also should add you had a 2.1 assist turnover ratio, which is point guard territory. So have you always been a playmaker, or is that something that developed at Rice?
Yeah, I think I've always been able to do it a little bit. At Rice, I really had kind of a lot of opportunities to make plays and trying to just make the most of those opportunities.
Okay. So it wasn't like, a lot of guys say, well, I was a point guard when I was in 8th grade and then I grew, 3 feet, and not one of those stories.
Yeah, no, I don't have a cool story like that for you, to be honest. But I think I just, I don't know. When I was young, I played like a lot of soccer.
Right.
Like I played in the midfield and a lot of like distributing the ball. So maybe that has something to do with it. If you're looking for maybe a little fun fact, but I'm not totally sure, to be honest.
Okay. All right. That's fair enough. So for those who haven't seen you play and just look at box scores, they'd probably be surprised to know that you're a capable jump shooter. You can put the ball on the floor and bring it up the court. Is there any specific part of your game that you've been focusing on this off season that we can expect your role to expand?
Yeah, I'm really just kind of working on my perimeter shot, becoming like a complete player. And I think that will just allow our team to, to have a little bit of different actions and something defensive haven't really seen a whole bunch.
Right. In terms of shooting, last season you took 18 jumpers. You made 50% of them, which is a nice percentage. And, from what I could see, you have a solid stroke. But one thing I noticed is you seem to be a lot more comfortable and reliable when you have time to prepare for the shot. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I would say so. It's not really, I'd say, something that I've been shooting just a whole bunch, kind of up until this point, just not something that was a part of my game. But I'm really been emphasizing that, working on it, and I think just with more reps and more of that, you get more confidence, and hopefully that'll translate more.
Right. Have coaches been, you're a 67% career foul shooter. Have the coaches writing you about that one?
Yeah, I'm working on that every day, pretty much, just trying to hit higher percentages. Really, just make teams pay for putting us on the foul line. Don't let them off the hook easy by missing those.
Right. But like I said, when I watch you shoot, you look pretty comfortable. It doesn't look awkward. I mean, I was watching Jaren Jackson last night, and if I had to say who has the better stroke, I'd say him too. So I mean, it's not ugly. So you just think it's a matter of confidence, reps.
Yeah, just every day I've been really focused on it, getting a little better, and I'm really excited to watch it unfold this year.
All right. So the Owls are moving to the American Athletic this season, and bringing a few. Actually, I think, is it 4 or 6 CUSA teams are coming with total?
I think it's 6 total.
Yeah, I think it's 6 too. Crazy. But compared to most in the conference, and we're gonna be previewing your conference this week on the episode. So compared to the most in the conference, your team is pretty much intact. You lost Quincy Oliveri. I said that right, correct? Shooting guard. And he went to Xavier, and he was an integral part of your team. But still, you bring back your 4 other main guys, and you also bring in a handful of promising newcomers, including Noah Shelby, a guard, a transfer from Vanderbilt, who was a high recruit, and a freshman high recruit in Keanu Dawes, who's a forward, I guess more of a power forward than a small forward. So I guess I have a couple questions with the team here. Is Noah going to be the guy to replace Quincy in the starting lineup? And how would you overall compare this squad to last year's squad?
Yeah, that would be the first one. Would be a question for the coaching staff.
Okay.
No, I'm just trying to get everyone on board, have everyone playing their best basketball coming up here soon. So not really too worried about those decisions. And what was the second question?
How would you compare the team to this year's squad to last year's squad?
Yeah, we got a whole bunch of new guys, a lot of freshmen, a handful of transfers too. really, really talented. I think they'll bring a lot, some new additions to their team, to our team. And excited, just really been building chemistry with them, and hopefully build off last year.
Okay. Would it be fair to say that it looks like you're going to have a lot more depth?
Yeah, I would say so a lot. Our practices, they've been really, really competitive. Got a lot of guys, fighting for opportunities, and I think that's good. I think it's just we'll have a deep team, and it's if it's not someone's night, the next guy in the line will be there to pick us up, and that's really a luxury I think we're going to have this year as a team.
Right. So I think most observers, and I don't think any preseason predictions have been made yet, though we will be making some this week on the show. But I think most observers are going to say that the AAC the regular season title is going to come down to a reloaded Memphis team who seems to have brought in almost as many players as Deion Sanders brought into Colorado, and an intact Florida Atlantic squad that made the Final Four last year. So I believe Rice is one of the few teams that could be in the running for a possible third NCAA bid from the AAC. But it might have to come down to the conference tournament. But with all that being said, what gives you the confidence that you can make a run at March Madness this year? And is there a particular thing about the team that you're seeing, or a particular player that maybe you think is going to have a breakout season that is really going to surprise people this season?
Yeah, I just think we've been kind of last few years, we've kind of been building, and now I really think that we're at a point where it's our time to, take the next step, compete for the top of this league, and kind of accomplish the things that we've really been aiming for. But I think now, I think we got the roster. I think we have the plan in place. I think it's time to just go kind of take what we've been wanting. It's not going to be easy. There's a lot super talented league, but we think we can, when we're playing well, we can compete with all those teams and really get after it.
Right. I think another thing that people are I know they overlooked last year. I mean, you were in the upper half of CUSA last year, and people just totally underrated that conference. I mean, Florida Atlantic goes to the Final Four. North Texas wins the NIT, and who do they play? UAB. I mean, in the postseason, Florida Atlantic won 4 of 5 games, and North Texas and UAB won 9 of 10. So, I mean, you guys and you were right there with those teams. You were competitive with those teams. You were just like the next step below. So, yeah, that's one of the reasons why I'm a big believer in you guys this year. All right, so let's do a couple fun questions before I let you go. I know you got to get to the weight room. You're a Florida native, and I hear you're an avid surfer. Isn't that a difficult sport for tall people?
Probably. I don't know what it's like to not be tall, so I just
Good point.
it doesn't seem too far-fetched for me.
Well, I was always a downhill skier, and I always felt, being under 6 foot helped me with balance. I just had low center of gravity, and it was just easy for me to maintain my balance on skis. I've never surfed, so I can't speak to that. So is there anything about surfing you think helps you on the basketball court?
I'm not sure, to be honest. It's a little bit of a little exercise, so it's probably better for you than playing video games, getting out in the sun, get some sun on your skin. But as far as basketball training, I'm not sure there's a whole bunch.
Well, it's got to be good for your core, no?
Yeah, I mean, it's got to help a little bit, I like to think.
Yeah. All right. So lastly, I know you come from an athletic family. And I don't know, I assume you know this. You have the same last name as a famous German conductor, composer who lived, actually, he passed away about 90 years ago, but same exact name. So I want to know, do you know if you're related to that composer, or were your parents a fan of classical music, or do they just like the name Max?
No, there's no relation, no nothing. I think it was just another Fiedler's a German last name, so I know he's a German guy. So there's the last name, and as far as Max, I think there's no connection there, unfortunately.
Okay. So you're not musically inclined?
No instruments or anything on this end. So
okay. Hey, I know I said last question, but I lied. I did see your major online, and I know Rice is one of the finest academic institutions in the country. So I'm curious, what are you studying?
Yeah.
Or what did you get your degree in, and then what are you studying?
So in May, I graduated. I studied math, econ, so economics, and a little more of a like technical, quantitative aspect.
Right.
So finished that up, and now I'm starting MBA, business school.
Nice, very nice. Well done, sir. Well done. Congratulations on your degree. Well, Max, I want to thank you for being on the show. It was a pleasure, and I hope you come back after the season and talk about the next phase of your basketball career. And for people who haven't seen you play, you got to see Rice play. They move the ball. If you're a basketball purist like I am, the way you guys move the ball, set the picks, and very efficient on offense, a lot of assisted baskets, and you are in the center of it, literally. So it's fun to watch you play. So wishing you and the team the best this season.
Sounds good. Yeah. I appreciate you taking the time, and thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it was a pleasure, Max. So it was great to talk to Max. And when we open up our conference previews, we'll talk about the conference he played in last year. And that is Conference USA. And I think we could make the argument that they were the most underrated Division I basketball conference last year. And this conference was, but due to realignment, they may be far less relevant this coming season. All three of the teams that had significant postseason success, being Florida Atlantic, and North Texas, UAB, are all moving on to the American Athletic. In total, Charlotte, Rice, and Texas San Antonio are also joining them. So 6 Conference USA teams are moving on to the AAC. Now, Conference USA is bringing in 4 new teams. Jacksonville State and Liberty from A-Sun, right? And Liberty was right at the top of the A-Sun. Jacksonville was toward the bottom. And then from the WAC, they bring in Sam Houston, who was also very near the top of the WAC last year. And, of course, New Mexico State, who had a disastrous season that was cut short because the program was shut down because of all kinds of improprieties. They are now in rebuild mode, but a traditional mid-major power in the West. So I think long-term, New Mexico State should be back on the basketball map eventually. So there was a net loss of 2 teams, putting CSU at 9. So what happened last year? Last year, as we know, Florida Atlantic won the regular season title by 2 games over North Texas. They defeated UAB in the conference tourney and got the automatic bid to the NCAA tournament. When you look back in retrospect, one could say that North Texas or UAB probably deserved a bid, but FAU was the lone school to make the big dance. The Owls, proceeded to string together wins over Memphis, Fairleigh Dickinson, Tennessee, Kansas State to make the Final Four. Of course, all 4 victories were no more than 8 points. And Florida Dickinson did Florida Atlantic, a big favor by defeating number 1 seed Purdue. And San Diego State, of course, ended Florida Atlantic's run in a nail-biter, 72-71, to advance the national championship versus Connecticut. In the A-Sun, where Liberty is coming from, Liberty and Kennesaw State tied for the regular season title, met in the conference championship. Kennesaw prevailed by 1 point, and advanced to the NCAA tournament, while Liberty advanced to the NIT. They defeated Villanova and then lost to Wisconsin in the NIT. In the WAC, Sam Houston finished second during the regular season and lost in the conference championship to Grand Canyon by 3 points. Sam Houston went on to advance to the second round of the NIT, defeating Santa Clara and then losing to North Texas, the eventual champion. So North Texas and UAB, again, moving on to the American, won 9 of 10 games in the NIT and eventually met in the championship, and with North Texas winning. So let's see here. All right. So I guess we'll talk about coaching changes. I think we have 3 coaching changes in the conference, not counting the departing teams.
Yeah, so excuse me. So kind of a fun little thing going on here. Sam Houston State, New Mexico State, like you mentioned, are leaving the WAC for Conference USA, which means that technically Jason Hooten moved interconference then, I guess you could say, going from Sam Houston State to New Mexico State, who obviously has been a power in the WAC, has been one of the best mid-majors on the West Coast. They were completely gutted by a disastrous season from Greg Heyer last year, who somehow, some way finds himself employed as a basketball coach this year. Taking over for Jason Hooten, though, at Sam Houston State is his longtime assistant, Chris Mudge, who's now the head coach, had been an assistant there for a while, and the associate head coach the last few seasons for Jason Hooten. And then finally, after a couple seasons where I thought Rick Stansbury had some really good Western Kentucky teams, that included Charles Bassey, that included Jamarian Sharp, that he kept falling short in the conference tournament. And taking over for him is Steve Lutz from Texas A&M Corpus Christi, who got the Islanders to the NCAA tournament the last 2 years, where they won the first 4 both times.
Right. Right.
Or no, excuse me, they lost to Texas Southern 2 years ago, but they ended up winning this year over SEMO. So yeah, good for. I think Steve Lutz, really good hire here. Had success in the Southland, which unfortunately is one of the weaker conferences in college basketball. But yeah, not too much here. But I think Jason Hooten's a really good hire to New Mexico State, probably for the long term. Because if Femi Udukale doesn't get a waiver right now, kind of like, is Mexico State going to have enough? But I think long term and with the resources and the support New Mexico State has, really good hire. And then I like Steve Lutz as well. Just got to get over the hump, make the tournament. Rick Stansbury, I thought some really good teams. They just couldn't get there in March.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Rick Stansbury had a knack of taking, high-level players who didn't really pan out at other schools, maybe just weren't getting the playing time they wanted to or whatever, and always seemed to have, a starting lineup at least, of pretty well-known, like 3, 4, maybe even a 5-star guy here and there, but yeah, they never gelled as a team, really, and always seemed to be underachieving, what they look like on paper versus how they played in the conference. So, all right. So we'll start off with Sam Houston. They were a defensive-oriented team, one of the better defensive teams in the country last year, also a good shooting team. But they lose their biggest losses. Start off with Quay Grant, who was the player of the year in the WAC. And they also lose Dante Powers, Javion May, Tristan Akipe. When we look at these guys, they're losing their top 3 in minutes. They're losing their top 2 scorers. And they're losing 2 of their better 3-point, or actually 3 of their best 3-point shooters, because Akipe and Powers and Grant were all, pretty productive 3-point shooters. Who they have returning, their best player returning is probably Cameron Hefner. They also have shooting guard. Hefner is a small forward, and he's the top returning scorer in the team. He averaged, he averaged about 10 points a game last year. They also have shooting guard Lamar Wilkinson coming back. He had a defensive rating. He was 4th in the WAC for defensive rating. Like I said, this was a 3-and-D team last year. So they would be the most significant newcomers, or excuse me, returning players. They also have coming in through the portal, Suleiman Dumbaya, a center from TCU, didn't get a lot of playing time there. And they also have an interesting player from D2 coming in, Owen.
It's like McGlashan,
yeah. Who really, like most D1 players who make this move, pretty much had a very nice Division II season last year, averaged about 12.5 a game, shot 41% from deep, good rebounder. He gives you some size too. He's 6'7", so he's a big wing. But overall, Sam Houston, seems to be losing 5 guys who gave them significant minutes. They're still also returning 5 guys that were decent contributors last year, but I don't know. The coaching changed and everything. I'm just not enthusiastic about this team.
Yeah, they're certainly losing a lot. And then with the coaching change as well, with how good Jason Hooten had been there, one of the best stretches in the history of Sam Houston State was when he was there. I guess you could take at least some, I think there's definitely some good to take out of it when you see that one of his top assistants who had been there essentially with him, that entirety of that run that Jason Hooten went on is big. But, you are losing, of course, the top dog and the head honcho of those teams that excelled defensively. And you can make the argument should have won the WAC this year in the conference tournament, and we're right there with Utah Valley. But yeah, they're losing too much for me. I think Suleiman Dumboya is interesting, coming from TCU, a young guy that had to play behind Eddie Lampkin and had to play behind Xavier Cork and Jacoby Coles. There was people in front of him that he had to play behind. But he just doesn't have a whole lot of experience even playing college basketball. So, moving down a level, sure, he could probably play here, but not really sure what to expect from him right away with how raw he is, and just he doesn't have those minutes and that experience that you're looking for. So, yeah, they're certainly going to take a step back, as well as the next team we're going to talk about. But, as far as like state of the program, I guess, I think Sam Houston, to promote from within for somebody who had been on that journey with you through one of the best stretches that Sam Houston State had. I think you could do a lot worse. But on the court, yes, they're losing a lot. They're going to take a step back. But it'll be, I don't think this is for the long term. I just think this is a 1-year thing with everybody leaving, and of course Jason Hooten leaving as well.
Right. Liberty too, a new team to the conference, and as they move to this new conference, they are losing the player of the year from the Atlantic Sun and Darius McGee, the little point guard, explosive scorer. He's moving on to the pros, and they also losing center Blake Preston, who wasn't a huge piece to the team. So actually surprised he's going to Northwestern. But McGee, gave them 23 points per game, 3 assists per game, 1.6 steals per game, and like I said, the player of the year in the A-Sun, and that's a huge loss. But they do bring back some interesting pieces, and a lot of these guys can shoot, and that was Liberty's calling card last year. Very efficient offense, good shooting team, and that's led by small forward Kyle Rode. He led the ace, or he was 4th in the A-Sun for win shares, also 4th in plus minus in the A-Sun. So this is a good overall player who has nice height for a wing and can shoot. He has nice stroke, pretty stroke. They also bring back Colin Porter, who in was 6th in the Atlantic Sun last year at about 4 assists per game. Also was in the top 10 with a 24% assist percentage. He was in the top 5 for steals per game at 1.4. They bring back Silo Robinson, a power forward, had a effective field goal percentage of 61%, which was top 10 in the A-Sun. Also had the second best defensive rating in the A-Sun, so he returns. They also bring back Joseph Van Zandt, who was 3rd in the A-Sun in field goal percentage at 63%. Also the top-rated offensive player in the A-Sun, and he's a shooting guard. And they also bring back another couple of pieces that saw some action and were pretty good in limited time, and that's shooting guard Brody Peebles and forward Zach Cleveland. So there's still a lot of things left. Now, incoming from the portal are some players from what you would probably consider higher level programs, especially Xander Yates coming from Creighton and Caden Matheny, a point guard coming from Bowling Green, though neither of these players, were standouts, with their former team. So I don't know if I'm overly excited about those guys, but I still think, Liberty has enough, as we go through, how those players played last year, that they're going to still be pretty darn good team.
Yeah, I would agree. Now it's really, really tough when you lose a guy like Darius McGee who could fill it up. One of the better scorers in all of college basketball, as well as player of the year in the A-Sun last year. But I gotta say, I like this little guy, Colin Porter. He's exciting. He's little. He's only 5'9", but he's fast. He can create events on defense. He can pass a little bit. Obviously, he's no Darius McGee scoring the ball. Right, but I do like what he can bring to the table. And I think with a damn good coach like Richie McKay as well, and with some of the, you don't have your star coming back and you're missing another starter in Blake Preston. But with the guys they have coming back, the starters, the role players, and a really good coach in Richie McKay, I'm actually pretty optimistic about this team this year.
Yeah, the only thing is, of all the players we mentioned, not one of them is taller than 6'7". So yeah, they are going to be a small team, but they will probably be a very efficient, good shooting team. And like Porter, as I said, was one of the better passers in the A-Sun last year. And so, yeah, I think that they're going to be very competitive and toward the top of this division or conference, excuse me. Okay, so we're going down the list, and the next team we're going to talk about is Middle Tennessee State. I tried to now, admittedly, we're mixing this conference is now a mix of 3 different parts of 3 different conferences. So, but I tried to put them in order of how they finished last year. Middle Tennessee was toward the top, or actually, I'd say upper half of the Conference USA last year. And their best player, who I mentioned at the top of the show, Tifali Leonard, he initially transferred to Memphis, and then Memphis kept on adding players. As I said in the interview with Max, I think that only Deion Sanders has brought in more new players than Penny Hardaway did this year. And so, which we will get to. It's incredible what Memphis is bringing in. But I think what happened was he thought he wasn't going to get the playing time he wanted. And instead of transferring to another school, he decided to, quote unquote, turn pro. But as far as I know, no one has picked him up yet. They also lose Eli Lawrence to Texas A&M. He was a significant part of the team last year, and they also lose DeAndre Dishman. So Lawrence, Leonard, and Dishman were 3 of the top 4 players on the team in terms of minutes played. They were also both Dishman and Lawrence averaged in double figures, and the only other player to average in double figures on the team is the returning player Cameron Weston, a shooting guard, very good free throw shooter, gets to the line a lot. Also, they bring back Elias King, a forward, and he is probably the best player on the team. Last year, he's the leading returner for the conference for three-pointers made, and made 41% of his threes. He also can play small forward, power forward. They bring back wing Justin Buford and center Jared Jones. They also bring in at least one interesting transfer, and that's Josh Ugundale from Iowa. And Josh wasn't a standout, but he's huge. He's huge. He's almost 7 foot, 300. Only played 38 games in his 3 years at Iowa for a total of 185 minutes. But in this conference, which is generally on the small side, he could be very dominant on the inside. His career field goal percentage at Iowa is 60%. So I expect, he's going to be a double figure scorer on the inside, also grabbing some boards and block shots. They also bring in Tyron Mosley from Mississippi Valley. He is last year he had a pretty good year for Mississippi Valley, averaged 11 points a game, very good from the field, 52%, and excellent from the line, 3-point line, 3 attempts per game, 49%, also shoots 80% from the foul line. So they bring in 2 interesting new players to join two of the better players in the conference in Cameron Weston and Eli King. Any comments on Middle Tennessee State?
Yeah, I think Ugundale is interesting, but he had to play behind Luka Garza, had to play behind Philip Rebracha. The playing time wasn't there, but there's also not a whole lot of experience. You're playing you divide those minutes up. You played 60 minutes a year. So an interesting transfer to go down from a Big Ten school, but also a 300-pound guy. I don't know how much. Damn near 300-pound. I don't know how much life you're going to get out of him. Is he in shape to play a lot? Do you think he can start?
Right.
I don't know. So it certainly is an interesting transfer, but not really sure how this works out. All things considered, guys going on a senior year, and it's like there's way younger players that have just played a lot more than them.
Right. But at this level, like I said, when you're going up against a team like Liberty that doesn't have anybody taller than 6'11", I still think he could be an impact player. Maybe it's only 20 minutes a game, but that's 20 minutes that they're going to get from a 7-foot guy who weighs well over 250 that nobody's going to be able to move out of the paint. So I think it's worth noting, but yeah, your concerns are duly noted. Now we move on to Western Kentucky. And they, as I said at the top, Rick Stansbury was famous for, bringing in some high-level guys, especially at the mid-major level. And he loses a lot of those guys this year. He loses Davion McKnight, their excellent point guard. He moves on to Xavier. They're losing the defensive player of the year in the conference, Jamarian Sharp, who goes about 7'5". He's a Manute Bol-like player. He moves on to Ole Miss. They lose Emmanuel Acott, a former Arizona guy, played a couple years at Western Kentucky. He was kind of more of a defensive stopper type at the forward position. They lose Jarius Hamilton. You might remember him from Boston College, a high-scoring, big wing type. And they lose Luke Frampton, one of the best shooters in the conference. But they still bring back some significant players. Dante Allen, you might remember him, a sharpshooter from Kentucky, is still there. Christian Lander, a high-level recruit from Indiana, is there at point guard. And they also return Tyrone Marshall, who was a pretty productive player last year, though didn't get a lot of minutes, kind of productive, was pretty productive when he got the chance, and he's a forward. They also bring in Brandon Newman, a sharpshooter from Purdue, who was got limited playing time at Purdue, but he had his moments. So there were times, when Newman was a freshman and sophomore, thought he might have some pro potential because he definitely could come in off the bench and light it up. But usually, his good games were, pretty far spaced apart, but the guy can shoot it, and they also bring in a couple other transfers. Terrion Murdoch's, a point guard from Texas A&M Corpus Christi. He averaged close to a 13.4 points per game last year. Decent from the field, 49%, and also decent from three, 34%. Very good foul shooter, 83%. He also averaged 5.4 assists. So this is a guy with only about 2.2 turnovers per game. So this is a guy who knows how to run an offense. Also bring in seldom used Rodney Howard from Georgia Tech. Now, Howard played a lot more. I shouldn't say seldom used. He was just a reserve for Georgia Tech, but he has averaged for 4 years at Georgia Tech. He averaged about 15 points per game. He's a good interior scorer and typical big. He goes about 6'11", bring in some rebounds, bring in some block shots. So he definitely has a fair level of amount of experience, but he certainly wasn't a star at Georgia Tech. So what do you make of Western Kentucky?
Yeah, so losing a lot, number one. I mentioned that I do like Steve Lutz, and he brings in his point guard, Terrion Murdoch, who is dealing with an injury right now. He's not going to be healthy for the start of the year. Might be plans to redshirt him, might be plans to put him back or play him, as the season progresses and when he's ready. I saw that. Shout out to the portal report while he was a transfer pretty late, and he had said he's dealing with an injury. It's not going to happen right away for him, but he can commit somewhere and they can kind of figure out a plan. So makes sense that he goes with his old college coach, someone that will probably let him do whatever he wants with his recovery. Yeah, I like the guys they brought in, getting Christian Lanier from Indiana, getting Dante Allen from Kentucky, Brandon Newman, experienced guy who played a few years at Purdue. But it's definitely going to be a step back when you lose an Emmanuel Cut, you lose a Davion McKnight, and then of course you lose Jamarian Sharp, who just blocks everything. He's so big. It's probably going to be a big difference maker in the SEC. So I feel like it's definitely a common theme with this conference. There's newness with teams, a couple coaching changes to the point where I think Western Kentucky will be solid, and they'll definitely be a player in this conference with Steve Lutz both now and in the long term. But they are certainly losing a lot here.
Yeah. Now we move on to Florida International, and they are losing their best player from last year, and that's Denver Jones, and he's definitely a player to watch. He transferred to Auburn. I think he's going to be one of the more standout guys coming from a mid-level program going up to a high-level program. He averaged over 20 points per game last year, shot 37 from deep, 85% from the free throw line, give you some rebounds, assists, steals, very good all-around shooting guard. They also lose Nick Guadarrama, who was third on the team in minutes, wasn't very efficient last year, but he's a significant player nonetheless. He was third on the team in minutes. Their top returner is Arturo Dean, point guard, a little point guard who was freshman of the year last year in the conference. He averaged 3.8 assists, which is the top returner in the conference. Also averaged 2.5 steals per game, which is the top returner in the conference in that category. They also bring back big center Seth Pickney, who plays limited minutes, but when he does, he's very efficient. Seth is a 7-footer. He's the top returner in terms of field goal percentage at 72%. Also the top returner in blocks per game at 1.3 blocks percentage. Also offensive rating top returner, 131.9. Of course, this guy's very efficient because he does everything around the rim. Let's see who else is notable that's coming back. There's so it's Petar Krivakavich. I think I got I don't know. It's a tough one. It's a European name, but the interesting thing about Pitar was he was an excellent 3-point shooter, one of the few on the team beside Denver Jones. He averaged 4 attempts per game and shot at a 41% clip from deep. So he will be critical for deep on this team. They also bring back shooting guard Deshaun Gittins and center power forward Mohamed Sanogo. Both of those guys, Gittins wasn't ultra efficient last year, but not bad. He averaged about 7 points per game, was 5th on the team in minutes. Sanogo was 6th on the team in minutes. He was very efficient on the inside, but doesn't do much else, including not a very good free throw shooter. And then they have one transfer, and that's Jonathan Abar from North Florida. He had a decent season, though he wasn't a star on North Florida. He only played 16 minutes per game, but he's very efficient. 55% from the field, 35% from deep. Terrible foul shooter, though. But so actually, I take that back. He wasn't ultra efficient. So I'm not counting on it. If he only averaged 16 minutes at North Florida, he's probably not going to make a big impact. I mean, I think what's interesting about this team is they got 3 really interesting players in the 3 first guys I mentioned, Dean, Pickney, and Kravakovic. And, those 3 guys are probably, they're the core of the team. But this team, I don't see being nearly as good as last year without Denver Jones.
Yeah, I would agree. Want to give a quick shout out to Seth Pinkney. He played Archbishop Wood on the same team that Colin Gillespie and Andrew Funk were on, that won the Catholic League at the Palestra. Feels like forever ago. That was. But yeah, a guy like that who can come block as many shots as he can. His block percentage is pretty high, almost to the level of a Jamarian Sharp. But yeah, they're definitely going to take a step back without their big guy here, who did a bulk of their scoring at Denver Jones, and then Nick Waterama, feels like forever ago again, played at New Hampshire. So yeah, losing those 2 guys, I like it. With Dean coming back to freshman of the year, is big time. But yeah, I see a step back for the Panthers as well.
Right. Then we have Louisiana Tech, and they had the 3-headed monster last year of Kobe Williams, Keaston Willis, and Isaiah Crawford. And the bad news is for Louisiana Tech is Williams has moved on to Tulsa, and he took Willis with him. That leaves Isaiah Crawford as, the big star on the team now. Last year, he's a wing. He's the leading returner in the conference for player efficiency, win shares, and plus minus. Significant, all 3 measurements of overall performance. They also bring back point guard Jordan Crawford, center Kenny Hunter, who's the top returner in rebounding percentage in the conference, and also forward Drayvon Magnum. But the real interesting news is what this team is bringing in from the portal, and that includes Daniel Bacho of Texas Tech, formerly played with Arizona. He's power forward, center, a good shot blocker, can make a 3 once in a while, can definitely make some jumpers. He's not just a play in the paint type of guy. They also bring in former high recruit Devin Ree from Louisville. I don't even know if Ree played for Louisville last year. I think he did play, very limited, only 67 minutes. This guy was a pretty high recruit for Louisville. It's really nice size at 6'8". And they also bring in Jordan Turner from Baylor, another player coming in from a significant program, similar size. And at 6'8", he has played very, very limited minutes. But you have to think, when you combine Bacho, Ree, and Turner, plus the returning center, Kenny Hunter, it's going to be hard for teams to match up on the front line with Louisiana Tech.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. Now, losing those 2 guard turts, but Kobe Williams and Keaston Willis both going to join their former coach, and Eric Conkle, who is at Louisiana Tech with them. But yeah, you bring in a guy like Daniel Baccio, who blocked 1.5 shots a game last year at Texas Tech. And yeah, certainly gives him another good center out of throw in there with Kenny Hunter. So like with this team, lots to like come and get 3 power conference guys to transfer into a Conference USA team, which is big time. And yeah, I really, really like this team, especially Daniel Baccio, which we'll get to a little bit later.
Right. Also, I don't know if I even mentioned Dravion Magnum, but he is a returner. He was a part-time starter last year. Played 23 minutes per game, averaged 7 points per game, but he was solid. 43 from the floor, 37 from deep on 3.6 attempts per game, 81 from the line. This guy can definitely have scoring potential with more minutes. Also not a bad rebounder given the limited minutes, and he too is tall at 6'8". So they have 3 forwards, all 6'8", that also have some scoring and athleticism. The question is, who the hell's running the show for this team? I mean, Jordan Crawford is the leading returner. He's 6'3", has good size, but last year as a freshman, he was horrible, at least in terms of offensive efficiency. Only 33% from floor, 23% from deep, but very good with assists. 3 assists per game on only 23 minutes per game. His assist turnover ratio could improve. It's only 1.4 last year. So a lot, I think, is going to rest on Jordan Crawford's hands. I don't think he's going to need to be ultra efficient, but I think he's going to have to cut back on his turnovers. But if he can get the ball to some of these big guys and Isaiah Crawford, you might be looking at one of the better teams in the conference. All right. So now we get down to the bottom conference, teams that didn't do very well, and that's UTEP. I'd say interesting parts about UTEP is believe it or not, with all the defections, with all the teams going to the American Conference, T. Hardy, the shooting guard for UTEP, is the leading returner scorer in this conference at 12.8 points per game. That's not good. They also, UTEP has Calvin Solomon, who's a solid forward. He averaged 6.0 rebounds per game, which is the top returner in the conference, and had the top returning defensive rating, 93.8. So that's what's coming in. That's what's left at UTEP. Jacksonville State, what's interesting about them is they have Jawan Purdue, a small forward. He was 10th in the ASUN last year in rebounding. And they also have Kai Tandy coming in, the combo guard from Xavier is coming into Jacksonville State. And lastly, New Mexico State basically just is turning over the whole roster. And if you look, I'd say they brought in a lot of guys that had some decent experience at previous programs. And some of these guys had a decent amount of success. And probably the best of the bunch is Monze Jackson, who played for Jacksonville, the aforementioned Jacksonville State last year. He's a good rebounder. He's 7th in the ASUN last year for rebounding percentage, had a nice PER of over 20, which was 14th in the ASUN. They bring in, how do you say the Seton Hall guy's name?
Femi Odukale.
They bring in Femi Udukale from Seton Hall. Brandon Suggs got some decent playing time at UCF. Jordan Rawls, who was at Western Kentucky last year and had a great assist percentage of 26.4. If you look at these guys, some of these recruits are actually interesting. And yeah. I think so they bring in basically 7 notable recruits, but they bring back no one from last year, which is probably a positive. And of these 7 guys, I actually think that if they can gel, I think they will avoid finishing in the basement in their first year in the CUSA. That's my prediction. New Mexico State will not finish last in this conference.
Yeah, I agree with you as well. I think Jason Tootin's too good of a coach, and I think his success for New Mexico State is more in the long term because this is a program, like I said, a lot of resources, a lot of fan support. You look at the success that Chris Jans had there. This is a program that I'm very confident he'll turn around, but in year one, having to throw this thing together with all the bad juju from last year and nobody coming back, which is probably for the best. I agree with you, though, Rich. I agree with you. I think that if now Femi Odukale needs a waiver, and if he can get that, I think you actually have a pretty solid team here that will certainly be competitive in this conference and not finish in the basement.
Right, right. All right, so let's move on to our conference selections. Who do you see winning this conference?
So it's tough because I do like Liberty and I like Louisiana Tech. However, I'm going to give the nod to Louisiana Tech with Isaiah Crawford coming back, and we're going to get to this guy in a minute, but I think Daniel Baccio is going to have a huge impact here. And Daniel Baccio coming in, guy who blocked a good amount of shots at Texas Tech, is going to be able to do even more in Conference USA, and I think it's his arrival particularly that's going to push Louisiana Tech over the top here. So I think that they will win the conference, and they will make the NCAA tournament in the new look, Conference USA.
Right. Now, I didn't get your predictions for 2 of the 3 conferences last week, but when we left off, we basically were in agreement on almost everything, and I agree. Louisiana Tech, I like them over Liberty in this conference. I think they're going to have the strongest front court in the conference. They're a little thin at guard, but the opposite can be said of, Liberty, who doesn't really have any height. But they have a very deep and talented backcourt. I think Sam Houston, Middle Tennessee, Western Kentucky, Florida International. I don't see any of those teams, probably not even NIT worthy, but they'll be in the mix for third. Yeah, there you go. All right, so how many teams make the NCAA tournament?
I am only going to say one, and you have this noted here. If North Texas, if UAB last year did not get an at-large bid, there's no way in hell I see a team this year getting one. Unfortunately, this is a one-bid conference. They lost their firepower, which unfortunately makes them probably, barring a team or two having a very, very good non-conference, this is probably a one-bid league for the very foreseeable future. For the time being, losing the firepower they did, this isn't going to be a conference, unfortunately, that's going to warrant 2 bids anytime soon. Yeah.
I think it's this one. Obviously, I'm picking Louisiana Tech, and like I said, Liberty should be there, right there with them. But all right, so Player of the Year is an interesting conversation. So what do you think?
I'm going to go again with Daniel Baccio. I think he's actually going to dominate this conference on both ends here. And if Louisiana Tech can win the regular season, and I think that they'll win the conference tournament as well, I think it's Daniel Baccio that's going to end up winning. He'll get Newcomer of the Year as well, really clean up on awards. But his presence on both ends, I think, is going to warrant a Player of the Year vote for sure.
Yeah, I would say right now he is the best NBA prospect on this team. I think he can shoot more than people give him credit for, but I'm going to go with Isaiah Howard. I just think he's going to have more of an offensive role this year. Same team, obviously. So we're thinking that Louisiana Tech has the 2 best players in the conference on their team. One guy I think is worth mentioning is Kyle Broad of Liberty. As I said, nice size for a wing, sweet jump shot, and he has an outside shot. All right, so now we're going to move on to the American, who obviously is gaining all those 6 teams from Conference USA, but at the same time they are losing Houston, Cincinnati, and UCF, or Central Florida, to the Big 12. So last year, Houston They lost just one conference game and finished 4 games ahead of Memphis for the regular season title. But in the conference tourney, the Tigers upset the Cougars to get the automatic bid to the NCAA tournament. Both Houston and Memphis went on to the big dance. The Tigers lost in a nail-biter to Florida Atlantic, who's now in the conference, and while the Cougars advanced to the Sweet 16 before falling to Miami of Florida, who went on to the Final Four along with Florida Atlantic. So both of them lost to a Final Four team in the tournament. 2 ACC teams made the NIT. Cincinnati advanced to the 3rd round with wins over Virginia Tech and Hofstra before falling to Utah Valley, and UCF defeated Florida in the opening round before losing to Oregon. Some interesting notes about who were the best teams in this conference. Tulane led the conference in points per game. They were 19th in the country, 79.9, and they were closely followed by Memphis at 79.4, 21st in the country. Houston, though, led the conference in offensive efficiency, 114.2, which was 6th in the country. In the meantime, incoming UAB led CUSA in points per game at 80.7, which 13th in the country, while FAU had the best offensive efficiency at 111.8, which was 16th in Division I. Houston was clearly the top defensive team in the conference for both points allowed and defensive efficiency. They ranked 2nd and 3rd in the country in those departments. In terms of points allowed in CUSA, North Texas was clearly the best team. They only gave up 55.8 points per game, which was tops in the nation. The Mean Green also led CUSA in defensive efficiency. They were 16th in the country, and FAU wasn't far behind, 25th in the country. In terms of pace, Tulane had the best pace in the conference, 74.9, which was 3rd in the country, followed by Memphis. They also played a fast style, and they were 23rd in the country in terms of pace. Houston was at the bottom in terms of pace. North Texas was the slowest paced team in the nation, which obviously helps their points per game allowed when they slow down the game. And Charlotte was the 2nd slowest paced team in the country. So CUSA had the 2 slowest teams in the country last year, and they both now are in the American. All right, so let's talk about coaching changes. We had quite a few.
So yeah, Amir Abdur-Rahim, he takes over at South Florida for Brian Gregory. Of course, Abdur-Rahim was the head coach at Kennesaw State when they won the A-Sun for the first time as a Division I school and made their first ever NCAA tournament. You mentioned North Texas. Ross Hodge is going to take over for Grant McCaslin, who's now at Texas Tech, that I think is quietly, well, not, I shouldn't say quietly. I do think it's one of the best hires at the D1 level this offseason was Grant McCaslin on North Texas, and his right-hand man, a guy who had been an assistant there for quite some time, Ross Hodge, will take over. Paul Mills, the head coach at Oral Roberts. Of course, last year when unfortunately they couldn't make a shot and they got drubbed by Duke in the first round, but that team with Max Asmus that made the Sweet 16, obviously the head coach of that team, he takes over Wichita State for Isaac Brown, who made one NCAA tournament, made the first 4 in his first year as head coach, and then just couldn't replicate that success again. And then lastly, my alma mater, Temple University, Adam Fisher, former assistant coach, most recently at Penn State under Micah Shrewsbury, where they beat Texas A&M in the tournament this year. He takes over for Philadelphia's very own, Temple's very own, and the Philadelphia 76ers' very own Aaron McKee, who's now in an administrative role at Temple and stepped down. So Adam Fisher gets his first head coaching gig on North Broad in the new look AAC.
Right. All righty. So now we'll, once again, we're mixing conferences here, but we're going to list them in kind of the order they finished last year, kind of, sort of, since they weren't all in the same conference. We'll start off with Memphis. They lose Kendrick Davis, their explosive little point guard, move on to the pros. And they also, we don't know this officially, but right now we have to say DeAndre Williams Their do everything forward is probably also gone from the team because he's out of eligibility, though he is applying for a waiver. Now, we reported several weeks ago that we were supposed to get a decision on this by the end of August. Well, we're well past August, and we still don't have a decision. They also lose Chandler Lawson to Arkansas. Alex Lomax graduated. Elijah McCadden graduated, and Keontae Kennedy went to Cal. The only significant returner on this squad, and he almost didn't return, this was a last-minute decision on his part, is center Malcolm Dandridge. Part-time player, part-time starter type guy. Decent, but nothing to write home about. But what this team is bringing in is just tremendous. I mean, we usually just list the most significant guys coming in. We have 12 guys listed for Memphis. And it starts off with four-star combo guard Mikey Williams, Mikey Williams. And he is the best incoming freshman on the team. They also bring in Javon Quinterly from Alabama, a longtime point guard, played at Villanova, played at Alabama, excellent ball handler, spotty shooter, but definitely should be, an all-conference type player at Memphis. They bring in David Jones, who kind of had an off year at St. John's, played very effectively the year before for DePaul. Small forward, probably can also play big power forward, can shoot the ball. He's a good player, probably had an off year in his one season at St. John's. Caleb Mills, used to play for Houston, then went to Florida State. Now he's back in the conference. He's a wing. He's never quite lived up to his potential when I think he was freshman of the year in this conference. They bring in Jordan Brown, former 5-star from Louisiana. They bring in Jaquan Walton, who was supposed to go to Alabama, then got in some trouble down there in Tuscaloosa. But he is the leading returner in the conference in terms of player efficiency rating and plus minus. This guy is a very good player. He just has to stay out of trouble. They also bring in J.J. Taylor, another 4-star a small forward. They bring in Nick Jourdain, a solid rebounder, power forward type from Temple, who can also block shots. He is the leading returner to the conference in terms of block shots at 1.1. They bring in Jonathan Pierre, the kind of do-everything forward who played at D2 Nova Southeastern, who Jake and I interviewed back in the spring. It was spring, right?
Yep.
Yeah, we had Jonathan on the show. Jonathan at the time looked like he was probably maybe going to be no worse than the 6th man on this team, but now with all the new additions, I'm not sure how much playing time he's going to see. This guy goes about 6'9", 6'10", can handle the ball. And then and they have 3 other recruits. I'm going to stop right there, but they have 3 other incoming freshmen that ranked somewhere between 110 and 235 on the composite rankings. So this team is loaded with newcomers. Can they gel?
And that's kind of what the question has always been with Penny Hardaway. But the last couple of years, it seemed like they've started to hit their stride toward the end of the year. Of course, you remember 2 years ago when they had Jalen Duren, they were up on Gonzaga at halftime. And the beginning of that season, they did not even look like a tournament team.
No, not at all.
So it's big time that they're able to get Javon Quinterly. When you lose a guy as dominant as Kendrick Davis with that much experience and just a total dog, to bring in a 5th year like Javon Quinterly, who's been on some successful teams, is big time, and is certainly going to play a big part in doing the gelling. I think they'll get there. I still think this team is first of all, they're talent-wise, it's off the charts for this conference.
For this conference, yes.
Yeah, with everybody leaving, it's off the charts. To get a guy like Jaquan Walton, who started in the AAC at Wichita State, then went to Alabama. Didn't happen. He got in trouble there, left the program. Went to UCF, who just left this conference and is now headed to the Big 12. He finds himself back in the AAC at Memphis. It seemed I don't know how this happened, because he was at UCF, and then all of a sudden, within a span of maybe a day or a handful of hours, he decommitted from UCF and he's on campus in Memphis. He's going to enroll there. But to get a guy like him, long athlete who could really could shoot the ball as well. And I've been a Nick Jourdain fan, especially on the defensive end for sure. While he was at Temple, athletic dude, he can switch, which is what Temple really always wanted to do. They wanted to be able to switch on defense and play with 5 guys who could switch at all times. And although he's an undersized center, which is why he plays the 4, for a 4, he can block shots really, really effectively. So if that's the way that Penny Hardaway wants to play, maybe while Jordan Brown is on the bench, you bring in a guy like Nick Jourdain who can still give you some rim protection if you decide to play a little bit smaller. Could be big for them. But yeah, even with the losses and even with DeAndre Williams' status up in the air, which you're absolutely right, I thought we were supposed to get an answer on this 2 weeks ago. This is still a supremely, supremely talented team. It's just on Penny Hardaway to get them together, get them to gel, because, hey, he's had some damn good teams, and we know Penny Hardaway can recruit as good as anybody. Look at the talent he's got. It's no joke. Ever since he's been at Memphis, the talent's been unbelievable. Got to start winning some games in the tournament, though. They won against Boise State 2 years ago, but they kind of threw the game away last year against Florida Atlantic. They certainly had a shot to win that game and probably should have, to be honest with you. They just couldn't hold on. But really, really like the talent on this team. They're going to be in the top 2. Barring a disaster, this is a 2 team. They have some bigs, of course, in Black Golden who can block shots. Is a really, really strong player down inside who can rebound as well. They have Giancarlo Rosado as well who can come in and give them a more like mobile and quicker twitch guy, I guess you could say, on the perimeter. That differs from just the kind of brick wall that Golden is. But of course, the continuity. It doesn't seem like these guys are too full of themselves, and because of that, like I think they all came back for the same reason. They could have transferred. I'm sure they had a ton of NIL money thrown their way to try and drag them from Florida Atlantic, but they seem like they're real put together, they're real connected. I think this team can absolutely make another Final Four. And Rich, I'll give you my prediction now. I think this team will win the American this year in their first year in the conference.
Wow, you're jumping ahead there.
Yep.
So yeah, John L. Davis and Elijah Martin both tested the NBA waters. Of course, Davis, in terms of top returners in the conference, was top returner in terms of win shares. I'm sorry, he played in CUSA last year, but he was 3rd in CUSA last year. For win shares, also 2nd in CUSA for plus minus at 8, which is awesome number. So I think he would be in the running for player of the year. As far as Golden goes, he was 7th in the CUSA in terms of blocks per game, 1.2. Also 2nd in CUSA in rebounding percentage. 8th in block percentage. And of course, Nicholas Boyd, it was one of the best 3-point shooters in CUSA. He was 4th in the conference at 40%. So plenty of talent there. They're not a big team beside Golden and Rosado. Everybody else is basically a guard. But yeah, definitely have the talent to be very successful this year. Next, we'll move on to the team that finished 2nd in CUSA last year, and that's North Texas. Now, they lose the CSUSA Player of the Year in Tyler Perry, who has transferred to Kansas State. They also lose Abu Usman, who transferred to Xavier, and Tyree Edey, who was a significant player for them last year. The best player that's probably returning for them is Aaron Scott, a good defender, can contribute in other ways, but I think his calling card is mostly defense, but he did shoot 41% from deep last year, but he only took 1.3 attempts per game. But he's a decent rebounder, not a bad passer, contributes steals and blocks, good all-around player. They also returned Kai Huntsberry, a combo guard, Reuben Jones, a wing, and Malay Sissoko, who is a center. Now, interestingly, this team is adding some decent big-time players from big-time programs, including Rondell Walker, a wing from TCU, and C.J. Noland, a shooting guard from Oklahoma. Both of these guys were high recruits coming to those schools. They also bring in Robert Allen, who's been a decent, solid player for Ole Miss. Not a consistent starter. He's a forward. He's 6'8", 230, really good size. Last year, he started 10 games, played 16 minutes per game. Solid on the interior, not bad from three-point line. And at this level, he could really shine. And lastly, they bring in John Buggs III from Texas San Antonio, and Buggs was a very productive player in this conference for a different team. And he was like a full-time starter, averaged 11 points per game, shot 40% from deep on 6.3 attempts per game, but he wasn't overly effective overall, only shooting 39% from the field, but he definitely can light it up from deep. He goes 6'2", so he's not huge, but at the same time, he's not really a point guard. So he's a small shooting guard. So, Jake, what do you make of North Texas, who was one of the best defensive teams in the country, arguably statistically, maybe the best?
Yeah, so, I mean, certainly they're losing a lot with Grant McCaslin, Tyler Perry going to Kansas State, who I think is going to be really, really well, play really, really well for Jerome Tang. And, he's got some big shoes to fill Marquise Noel's slot. But I still think Tyler Perry is going to be a big-time player in the Big 12. Certainly too good to play in the AAC. Losing Abu Usman as well is going to go to Xavier and try and fill the Jack Nunji role, as well as Jerome Hunter, who's out right now with an injury. But I like who they're bringing in. They're bringing in Rondell Walker, previously at Oklahoma State, transferred to TCU last year. Really good defensive team, TCU. They want to speed you up. They want to play fast. And although North Texas plays the complete opposite of how TCU plays, still is a defensive-minded team. I think he'll slide in nicely. And that's what North Texas is going to continue to do. With Ross Hodge coming in, who'd been with Grant McCaslin at North Texas, that's what they're going to do. They're going to grind you. And when I say that, I mean this team really grinded you to a halt. I mean, you were basically walking up and down the court against this team. Right, the way it slows you down. Very slow.
Very Virginia-like.
Yes. Slowed you down in the half court. They're going to continue to do that. And because of that, I think they can still be a solid team moving into a new conference, losing their head coach. I still think they'll be very solid. I know the defense is going to be there. I like the transfers they're bringing in. And I know that defense, there's a floor there with how good that defense is going to be. I really like this team to still be toward the top, moving from Conference USA to the AAC.
I agree. Next, we're going to talk about the third best team in the CUSA last year, and they finished second in the NIT with a loss to North Texas. Now, they lose one of the players in CUSA who is definitely in the running and probably, well, I won't say probably, but would have probably, I can't get away from the word probably. He was definitely in the running for player of the year, but what hurt him was missing a handful of games in the middle of the season, I believe. And that's Jordan Walker, who's moved on to the NBA. They also lost Trey Jemison, their big muscular center, who's moved on to the NBA. KJ Buffin was a great utility player. He's moved on to the pros. And also they had the very athletic tandem of Tyron Brewer and Ladarius Brewer, especially Tyron Brewer, who's an excellent athlete. So, all these guys all five of those guys that they lost were probably, and they also lost Taven Loven, who was one of the best on-ball defenders in CUSA, always near the top of the conference in steals. So you're talking about 4 to 6 guys that are probably going to be playing in the pros somewhere that this team lost last year. They do bring back, though, probably their best NBA prospect from that last year, and that's the very athletic and very speedy Eric Gaines. And Gaines actually played his best last year when Walker was not in the lineup. And so I would expect him to be in the Player of the Year discussion this year. I expect him to have a really big year. He last in CUSA, he was 7th in the conference in free throws made, and he made 79% of his free throws. He likes to attack the basket. He's tough to stay in front of, very fast. Also 4th in CUSA in steal percentage. Again, that goes along with that athleticism of his. They also bring back center Javian Davis, and that's about it for what's coming back. Now, interestingly, they bring in Barry Dunning, who was a high recruit who kind of got pushed out of Arkansas due to a roster crunch, and he really didn't get to play much at Arkansas. So this will be interesting to see how he does at this level. He's a wing. And they also bring in Daniel Ortiz, and he was a big-time scorer at North Alabama. He's going into his junior year. Last year, he averaged 15 points per game, shot 43 from the floor, 41 from deep, 77 from the free throw line. He's only 6 foot, and he's not really a point guard, another small shooting guard. But at this conference, the guards tend to be, a couple inches short. Everybody pretty much tends to be a little shorter. He should still be a very productive scorer. They also bring in the seldom used Will Shaver, a center from North Carolina. So what do you think of UAB? How do you think they're going to be this year?
Yeah, I still think they're going to be solid as well, even with all the losses. Guys like Jordan Walker don't come around very often. It's not like you can just get the leading scorer or one of the best in Division I, on your team every year. So obviously the scoring might take a step back, but I like the point you made about how Eric Gaines did play better in the games that Delly Walker was out for. And I think he's ready to make that ascension and step into the number 1 slot here. And with his speed, his athleticism, that really is spectacular. And he's one of the best athletes in this conference, maybe in college basketball. He's ready to step into that spot for it. So with him being one of the marquee players in this conference, as UAB makes the transition, I think he'll certainly be in the mix for Player of the Year. But again, like you look at what Andy Kennedy's doing, he brings in Barry Dunning from Arkansas, Will Shaver, like you said, from North Carolina. You look at all the guys that they lost: Trey Jemison from Clemson, Jordan Walker from Tulane. Was it KJ Buffin was at Ole Miss, I believe?
Yes. Yep.
That's what he continues to do, and I'm sure these are guys that Barry Dunning just couldn't hit forward Arkansas because there was so many guys in front of him. Right. So. Yeah, Andy Kennedy continues to do this. He's like a haven. They're almost kind of like Grand Canyon a little bit in the sense that they've just become a spot the last couple of years for high major guys to transfer down and produce more. And I think with these two guys, he's going to have, especially in Dunning, he's going to have people that can do that for him. So UAB, another team much like North Texas, they're going to slide right into the AAC and they're going to be competitive and at the top right away.
Okay. Next we have Tulane, who was kind of under the radar, but really a good, solid team last year, with some decent NBA prospects. One of those prospects, Jalen Cook, their point guard, has transferred to LSU. They also lost Tylen Pope, a reserve forward who gave them, he was kind of hit or miss, but he gave them some good minutes, and RJ McGee went to Southern Illinois. But they bring back a trio of really good players. Shooting guard Jalen Forbes averaged close to 19 points per game last year. He's the leading returner in that category in this conference. He's also the leading returner in three-pointers made with 88, and he shot 39% from deep. Also the leading returner in free throws made at 136, and he shot 86 from the free throw line. Also the leading returner in this conference for win shares. And then you have Kevin Cross, who has a very unique game, a big who they like to run their offense through, which kind of offsets a little bit the loss of Cook. Cross is a big power forward, sturdy guy. He averaged 4.2 assists per game, which is the best returner in the conference, and also is the top returner in assist percentage at 26%. And they bring in they don't bring in, they still have Sion James, coming back. He was in the NBA draft. He's got good size, good all-around player. Probably needs to improve his shooting percentages, shooting efficiency to really get on the NBA radar. But maybe, in terms of body type and athleticism, he might be the best of the trio. And then coming in is Glenn Gregg, a former high recruit who didn't get much playing time at Michigan. Kobe King, a point guard from St. John's, will likely step into the shoes of Jalen Cook. And Asher Woods, who is another high-scoring guard coming in from another conference. Asher last season as a freshman at VMI, he's 6'3", by the way. He averaged 14.2 points per game. Now, he wasn't very efficient from the field or from deep, but being a freshman, there's a lot of a lot of positives there for a kid who played 35 minutes a game for VMI. So, what do you think of Tulane, Jake?
Yes, this is a team that was toward the top again of this conference. I like the style they play. They're not a huge team with under Ron Hunter, but they want to fly up and down the court, score a lot of points. It sucks they're going to lose Jalen Cook, but Jalen Forbes certainly more than able to be their guy if he wasn't already last year. So, I like this team. Like I said, that style, playing really fast, playing small. Let's get points up. Let's get shots up. I think it'll be good. And I still think they'll be toward the top. But with the lost Tylen Pope, Jalen Cook, they're certainly not going to be in the same tiers as FAU and Memphis. But this will be a team that will certainly be in the top half of the conference, like into that top third, I think.
Oh yeah, for sure, I agree. All right, now we'll talk about your alma mater, and I won't go on too much about them. I'll let you do the talking about these guys, but Temple is losing Damian Dunn to Houston, Zach Hicks to Penn State. Zach is a forward, Damian Dunn is a guard, and Khalif Battle, who was their very mercurial, but could be an explosive scorer, could put up 30 points on anybody at any time. Nick Jourdain, a solid defender, center, and Jameel Reynolds also Jourdain's going to Memphis, and Jameel Reynolds is going to Cincinnati. I'll let you talk about the incoming guys. I just want to say a comment, or not the incoming guys, the returners. But one thing I do want to say about the incoming guys, which is probably headlined by Jordan Riley, former high recruit that didn't get a lot of playing time at Georgetown. He's a shooting guard. And then they bring in a handful of interesting guys from small schools who were pretty damn productive, if not very productive, at other schools, and or guys who just didn't get much of a chance, such as Quante Berry, a combo guard at Providence. He was a 3-star, didn't really see the floor. I don't know if he saw the floor at all at Providence. But they bring in Steve Settle, a power forward from Howard, very productive last year. Sam Hoffman, a small forward from Houston Christian, again, productive. Matteo Percerelli, a combo guard from Baltimore County. And lastly, they bring in freshman Zion Stanford. All right, Jake, take it away on your alma mater.
Yeah, so unfortunately with Temple letting go of Aaron McKee, and that whole situation, I do think they're in a solid spot as they could be. Now the problem is you look at these losses. Damian Dunn going to Houston, Zach Hicks going to Penn State, Caleb Battle going to Arkansas, with the exception of Nick Jourdain at Memphis, who basically I would say I guess you could they're better than a good chunk of Power 5 programs right now. They lost 5 guys that all went Power 5 that were in-demand guys that are going to elite programs.
Right.
And they went 500 last year. Now, they've been bit by the injury bug the last couple of years. Damian Dunn was out with a concussion for a couple of games last year. Jameel Reynolds had a hand injury that kept him out. Shane Zoney, who's one of the only guys coming back, he had a hand injury last year and was out. Jaleel White, during his entire tenure at Temple, has kind of been in and out of the lineup at times. So the injury bug just never kind of let them get off their feet. Because I felt like last year they had a good enough roster that if some things broke their way and they stayed healthy, they could have made the tournament. They certainly had the talent evident by where these guys are going.
Right.
But
Definitely. And the balance, a nice combination of size and so forth. Of course, the battle too left mid-season because of I think he didn't get along with Aaron McKee, I believe. And with battle, shot selection is always a question. I'm sure that came into play. One thing I want to say about Dezzoni, he was a really highly regarded recruit when he went to Vanderbilt, and of course he had to sit out last year. Or no, he didn't sit out, but I think he missed the beginning part of the season and then didn't see a lot of playing time when he was ready to play.
But they're going to take a step back here. Unfortunately, they're going to be in that bottom crop of team. They're not going to finish last in this conference, but this is certainly a rebuild year where Adam Fisher's got to bring in a lot of transfers. It took over 2 weeks for him to get hired. They were behind the 8 ball anyway, with him trying to put a roster together. But there is a couple guys here that I like. Now, that they got in the transfer portal. Now, you know anything about Adam Fisher? Previously, was an assistant at Miami under Jim Larinaga, and then also last year and the year before was an assistant at Penn State under Micah Shrewsbury. And if you know anything about that Penn State team last year, they were not very big. They flew up and down the court, and they put up a ton of threes. They threw up threes, and I think that's how this team is going to play as well. I was at Adam Fisher's press conference and seemed very adamant that they're going to play loose, play locked in. They're going to get up and down the court. They want guys to have the green light. And if you want to play that way, look no further than Matteo Piccarelli from UMBC. Shot in the 40s last year from 3. This guy is a pure shooter. Most of his attempts are going to be from the three-point line anyway. He's going to fit right in with what Adam Fisher wants to do. Really like Jordan Riley and what he can bring with his athleticism, but can't really shoot. Was a sub 20% three-point shooter last year, or in the mid-20s. Was not a reliable three-point threat, and it wasn't on a lot of volume either. And he didn't get a lot of time on a really, really bad Georgetown. Right. So there is that. But yes, you're absolutely right. He's a highly touted recruit. The guy I really like, though, I really like the addition of Steve Settle. If you need a guy who's been in college, for some time now, they made the tournament last year. He's been a part of some pretty good teams there at Howard. He's a big guy that can stretch the floor, can put the ball on the floor when he has to. If they're going to go up against a big center who's, can't really move out in the perimeter, that's going to be a mismatch that they're going to want to take advantage of. So really like Steve Settle. What he can bring on the offensive end is a big guy who can give them a stretch 4, a stretch 5. They're probably going to be playing a lot of small ball this year. This isn't a very big team. They have Emmanuel Akpomo coming back at center, but he really didn't play too much. Nick Jourdain was the backup center on this team, really. They had Core John Cooch as well, who came in from Northern Colorado, but Nick Jourdain, when Temple wanted to play small, gave them an option as a smaller forward who could still protect the rim. So I think rim protection is going to be an issue for this team, but offensively, I think they're definitely going to be able to spread you out. So low expectations for year one for Adam Fisher, given everything I just said. He was hired late in the process. They were behind the 8 ball. He lost a lot of really, really good players they weren't able to retain. But there is some stuff to like from the transfer portal here.
Yeah, definitely. The cupboard is not bare. So we move on to Wichita State, which has taken a slide over the last few years. Used to be a really powerful mid-major. And I'm hoping that the coaching change will turn things back around for them. But this year they lose one of the best kept secrets in college basketball last year, and that's Craig Porter Jr., their point guard. Don't be surprised if he doesn't make the Cleveland Cavaliers regular season roster. Right now he's on a 2-way, but I think he has a good shot to making the team with a good training camp to get that contract upgraded to a standard contract. They also lose Jaquan Walton, who we talked about at length before. He's going to Memphis. They lose James Rojas and Jaron Pierre, who transferred to Langston. Who's coming back for this team? Not a lot. They have 2 big guys, Kenny Poto and Isaiah Chandler, not super highly productive guys from last year. But coming in is some interesting pieces, starting with Harlon Beverly, played for Miami of Florida for the last 4 years. This is a guy who was a top 100 four-star guy. He's a combo guard. Never quite clicked for him at Miami. Could never get steady minutes. But Miami always had a deep roster. So this will be his time to shine. They also bring in a couple other guys that are younger, but also were at big-time programs and really didn't get a chance to shine where they were, and that's Ronnie DeGray, a small forward from Missouri, or a wing. Mind you, his season was cut short last year. He's played a total of 3 years, 1 year at Mass, 2 years at Missouri. He's 40 for his career, 47% from the floor, 30 from deep, 73 from the line. He's a decent rebounder, can also give you blocks and steals. So he is a versatile defender. Also, and I'm not sure how you say Cortez's first name. Is it Bijan?
Yep, Bijan.
Bijan Cortez, you would remember him, guys, if you watched Oklahoma at all last year. Very long hair, so he's hard to miss on the court. He was one of the top reserves for the Sooners last year. Played 17 minutes per game, 44% from the floor, excellent from deep, but not on a high volume. 48% on about one attempt per game. Now he only played 17 minutes per game. So he is a combo guard, and so he also is a very interesting addition to this team. But it's not, there's more. They're also bringing in Jacob Germany, a center from Texas San Antonio. He was second in CUSA last year in rebounding. And they bring in Dalen Reginald from Missouri State, and Makai Miles, a freshman 3-star, and he's a wing. So what do you think of Wichita State? Looks like they're starting from pretty much from scratch.
Yeah, but I will say I really like Paul Mills as a player. As a coach, of what he did at Oral Roberts. So I do think this team can finish middle of the pack, even with bringing in a whole bunch of new guys. I think Harlan Beverly, with a bigger role and being relied on a little more, will flash a little bit. And Bijan Cortez as well. They have two guys that played at power schools. Harlan Beverly, of course, on a team that made the Final Four last year. So I think with the guards that are coming in here, I think Wichita State will be solid. They'll finish right around the middle of the pack. It's a lot to lose, and you're absolutely right about Craig Porter. He really was terrific last year. I mean, I know he killed Temple. They played at the Leah Corr Center late in the season, and he single-handedly won the game for Wichita State in the second half. So with all that, and then Jaquan Walton, who the hell knows if he's going to be eligible at Memphis? I mean, he's going to be on his fourth school this offseason. Right. But regardless, I think they'll finish middle of the pack. Paul Mills is a good coach, and I think they'll be just fine. Enough to at least tread water.
Yeah. All right. So next up is Charlotte, and as I mentioned before, they were one of the better 3-point shooting teams in the American last year. CUSA, right? I'm kidding you. They were in CUSA last year. They lose their two best players, and that's and I think it's Ali. Is it Ali? Ali Khalifa and Bryce Williams. Khalifa's going to BYU. He's a forward, and Williams is a wing, and he's going to Nebraska. Now, cupboard's not entirely bare. First of all, they bring back their two guys who led the team in minutes, and Montre Gibson, their point guard, and Jackson Threadgill, a wing. And one of their three players who were double-digit scorers last year, one was Williams. He led the team, and he was a 3-point marksman. And then, we have Khalifa was second on the team at 12 points per game. Williams was first at 14. And then there was Patterson, the point guard, who's averaged 10 points, over 10 points per game. And they also bring in Igor, bring back Igor Milicic, who started his career at Virginia, a very highly regarded prospect coming out of Europe. And Igor he's big, he's like 6'9", 6'10", and he can stretch the floor, but it just hasn't really clicked for him yet. But we're still keeping an eye on him because, when he came to Virginia, we were pretty high on him as a young prospect. And so now I'm not sure what year he's in. I think he's a junior. Yeah, he's a junior. So first year at Virginia, second year at Charlotte. And even last year at Charlotte, he only played 21 points per game. He was decent from the floor, 48%, but still dragging behind as a three-point shooter, 34%, but 78% from the line. So with starter minutes, he might be a surprise this year. Definitely a player to keep an eye on. Now, what's interesting that's being added to this mix is two highly regarded centers. They're both young, and that's Deshaun Jackson from Washington State. These are true centers, and the athletic kind too. And Irisov Niago from USC. He's a Russian player. He was definitely a highly regarded prospect coming over from Russia. So this team's losing their two best players, but they still seem to have they could surprise.
I think so. It's really, really tough when you lose two of their best players, like you said, Ali Khalifa and Bryce Williams going Power 5. I think this is a bottom tier team losing those two guys, and even with the young centers from the Pac-12 coming in, I think this could be a pretty rough year. I think they'll certainly be in like the bottom 6 or so in this conference, maybe even lower than that. Those are two big guys to lose.
Right. But the reason I say is they bring back two experienced guards, and then they have Milicic and they have Nagu and Jackson, 3 guys that are at a minimum, they're 6'9" and above, who actually could prove, I would expect one of those to, emerge as, like a star in this conference. So that's why I'm not totally down on Charlotte, but they do lose their top 2 scorers. All right, Southern Florida. They lost Keyshawn Bryant, the ultra-athletic player who never quite put it together at South Carolina or South Florida. Be interesting to see how he does in the pros because, man, he has NBA athleticism, but just never came together for him. They also lose Russell Chiwa to Georgia. They lose Tyler Harris, the little guard, to graduation, and they lose Jameer Chaplin to Little Rock. So 4 key pieces to this team. Now, they do return Corey Walker, their power forward. He is the conference's leading rebounder in terms of rebound percentage, also the leading returner in terms of block percentage, and lastly the leading returner in defensive rating. So as you can see, this guy can play defense and he can grab the boards. They also bring back Sam Hines, a wing, and Shelton Miguel, a combo guard. Now, the most exciting piece coming to Southern Florida, and we almost had him on this episode, but we got canceled at the last minute, and that is shooting guard Chris Youngblood, who was the star last year for Kennesaw State, who had a very good basketball team. Chris is definitely on our draft board and pretty high up there. He is a 6'4" shooting guard. He's solid at 220. Last year, he started all 35 games, played 31 minutes a night. He averaged close to 15 points per game. He shot 46 from the field, 42 from deep, and 82 from the free throw line. 4.7 rebounds, 1.8 assists, 1.1 steals. This guy is a stat sheet stuffer and definitely an NBA prospect. They also bring in Brandon Stroud, who was a key piece at Kennesaw State. He's a small forward. And Kassan Jennings, a combo guard for Kennesaw State, another piece. And they bring in Kobe Knox, who is the brother of from Grand Canyon, a wing from Grand Canyon, who is the younger brother of Kevin Knox. So what do you make of Southern Florida?
So yeah, this team they really were not very good the last handful of years under Brian Gregory. But I will say, like, this team did play hard. They played their tails off. The results just weren't there. You mentioned Keyshawn Bryant. We always knew he was a pogo stick. He was a superior athlete, but just never put it together with the basketball aspect and shooting and stuff like that. Yeah, Chiba is a big loss. Monster center down there that can gobble up the boards and put up points down low. And they lose Tyler Harris, who came over from Memphis, a guy that played in college for a while. So they are losing quite a bit here. They're bringing in all the Kennesaw guys. That way was a damn good team last year. Had Xavier on the ropes. Certainly a good team. Kind of tough school, I guess, to be at. There's just not a lot of success in the last handful of years here for Amir Abdur-Rahim to walk into. So I like him as a coach. Maybe long-term this kind of works out. Not seeing it this year, though. Even with the Kennesaw guys coming in and know how Abdur-Rahim wants to play, I think this is another team that's going to finish in that last 5 here in this conference. I think this is a team and a program that hasn't been great in the AAC, and even with these new teams coming, I think they're still a little bit behind here. So not feeling too great about South Florida right now.
Yeah. But it is nice. I mean, really, their continuity is going to be from the Kennesaw guys, because the three returners I mentioned, beside Corey Walker, who another player who's never quite lived up to his recruiting ranking, the Sam Hines and Shelton Miguel, they didn't have great seasons last year. So. Yeah. All right. So we move on to Rice. And of course, our guest was their star player, or one of their star players last year, Max Fiedler. But the one player they are losing is Quincy Olivari, a guard who transferred to Xavier. But they bring back Max. In the interview, I went over all of his amazing statistics. He really highly productive in Conference USA last year. And they also bring back Travis Evie, a combo guard, ultra productive. They bring back wing Cameron Sheffield, a wing in Makai Mason, and a center power forward in Andrew Achui. Of those guys, I would like to mention Evie. He was the second leading scorer on the team behind Olivari. He averaged close to 16 points per game. Could be a little more efficient from deep. He was 35% on 6.5 attempts per game. Excellent from the free throw line, 82%. This guy will also give you assists and steals. And Sheffield was a solid 3-point shooter last year at 37%. Mason, also a solid 3-point shooter at 38%. So the cupboard is definitely not bare. And in addition, they bring in a 3/4-star recruit, and Keanu Dawes, a power forward. He's number 130 in the composite rankings. And they also bring in a former high recruit from Vanderbilt, Noah Shelby, who will probably end up in the starting lineup, replacing Olivari. And one other transfer I'd like to mention, they have, is Anthony Sheldon. Hasn't played a ton of minutes throughout his career, but last year he did for Gardner-Webb. Played 27 minutes per game. Very good from the field, 48%. Not a great shooter, but he can give you rebounding. He's a good defender, can give you steals and blocks, which is excellent for his size. He goes about 6'6", 225, so he will add some defense to a generally offensive team. Also bring in forward Sam Alajiki from California, and another good freshman in Gabe Warren, a 3-star guy, and he's a wing. So what do you think of Rice, Jake?
Yeah, I think they're kind of a middle of the pack team, maybe middle toward like the bottom. Bringing Fiedler back, it's big, even though they lose Quincy Olivari to Xavier. Joins quite a few transfers there, just kind of like they had last year. I do believe that, they're kind of middle of the road, I guess. I really like Travis Evie. Even when he was at VMI, I liked him as a productive scorer. and combo guard. But I think they're right around maybe the middle to like the bottom tier. I don't think there's a team that's crazy good, but they're losing kind of their best guy, but they bring back everybody else and actually bring in like some kind of high recruits. So maybe there's a little room for growth here, but I'm thinking right around maybe, I don't know, say like the 7 to 9 range, maybe somewhere in there for this team, 7 to 10, somewhere in there.
I see him higher than that personally. Fiedler is a unique center. Evie can light it up. Mason and Sheffield can shoot from deep. Then you add Shelby to the mix. As another distributor, another ball handler. You have Dawes, a highly respected freshman. I think this team is going to be toward the top 4 or 5 in the conference, but we are allowed to differ. East Carolina, they lose their best player in guard Javon Small, who's going to Oklahoma State. They bring back power forward Brandon Johnson. He's the conference's leading returner in rebounds per game, 8.1. They also bring back some other players that haven't quite lived up to their potential, and that's shooting guard R.J. Felton, power forward Ezra Asar, and shooting guard Jaden Walker. Interesting, though, they do bring in some very already well-established players from high programs, both point guards, and Cameron Hayes from LSU and Bobby Pettiford from Kansas. These guys should immediately be, among the better players in the conference. They also have a freshman center coming in, 3-star Seer Malanga, and he was 252 in the composite ranking. So, I see this team, definitely they're going to have some good guard play, and Brandon Johnson's a solid piece. And then you have Asar, who is never, it hasn't quite clicked for him yet. And then you have the freshman, Malanga at center. This team does have some upside.
Yeah, I agree with you. I actually think this team can surprise a little bit. It's just like surprise might not be the right word. Like, yeah, they weren't very good last year. And even if they finish like 7th, like, do we really call that like a surprise? But I actually think that this team might have the people might be sleeping on him. Cam Hayes, does he need a waiver or can he play right away? Is he a grad transfer? I know he's made a couple stops before. I don't know if that's if it's like a dead possibility he's getting it or not.
Well, he's only a senior. He played 2 years at NC State, 1 at LSU. I haven't heard anything one way or the other. So I've just been assuming everything's okay, but could be wrong.
Okay. If he's eligible to play with Bobby Pettiford, who's from Durham, North Carolina, moving a lot closer to home than he was in Kansas, I think that they can be solid when you have 2 guys that played Power 5 ball that are now going to come in the AAC and play here. I think they can actually make a little bit of noise here. So I like East Carolina, year 2 from Mike Schwartz. I think they can actually be pretty competitive, and I think you're absolutely right. This team has some upside with the guards they have coming in. These were 2 really, really good gets. Like, we could look back in this, and Cam Hayes and Bobby Pettiford are 2 of the best transfers that came into the league this year that weren't one of Memphis' guys. Yeah.
And, like Asar, Ezra Asar, he was only a sophomore last year. So, or a freshman. So if you look at it, he didn't offer much in the shooting department, but I don't know if he's going to need to, with the 2 guards they have. And so you put him and Brandon Johnson on the front line. And so they're, at least they're going to get good rebounding and some shot blocking. It's just, who's that 5th starter going to be? Is it going to be Felton, or is it going to be the freshman center? It'll be definitely an interesting team to watch. They could surprise, as you said. So SMU, traditionally a very good team, or toward the top in this conference, and this is really, I think SMU is really going to turn it around in a big way this year. So they lose Zach Nuttall and F.A. Udigi. Nuttall led the team in minutes, also averaged 11 points per game. Udigi was 5th on the team in minutes. also averaged a little over 11 points per game. So between the two, they're losing over 24 points per game. But, you have some solid returners and some interesting transfers coming in. And so returning, of course, is Zurich Phelps, one of the better NBA prospects in this group. He's a combo guard. He's the leading returner in the conference for steals per game at 2.3. They have Sam Williamson, who was once a top 30 incoming recruit at Louisville. He's never quite put it together. I think what Sam's, sometimes I question his love for the game. And of course, what's really missing from his game is a consistent outside shot. They also bring back Keon Ambrose Hilton, and he is only he's a senior, but he didn't really play a lot until last year. And even last year, he was limited to 14 minutes per game. However, statistically, efficiency-wise, he was highly efficient in those 14 minutes per game. He's the conference's leading returner in field goal percentage, 66, and offensive rating at 130. This is a kid who's 6'8", 215, was pretty highly regarded coming out of high school, and now it's his time to turn it on as well. And they also bring back combo guard Jalen Smith and Xavier Foster, who didn't play much last year. Xavier, when he was a freshman at Iowa State, which was 3 years ago, so he played very little at Iowa State, and I forget exactly what happened there, but I think he ran into some trouble. Then the following year, he did not play. Last year, I don't think he was eligible to play right away. And then he only saw action in 10 games, very limited action. But this is a kid coming out of high school, very highly regarded in terms of athleticism and shot blocking ability. He's 6'11", 235. So it'd be interesting. As you can see, it's a repeated theme with some of these guys returning for SMU. The potential's there. Is it going to happen? But incoming are some solid players who, have produced at high level schools, not stars, but solid players. And combo guard, Chucky Harris from Butler, and Tyreek Smith, very athletic power forward from Oklahoma State. He's a defensive specialist. They also have two former high recruits, Denver Anglin coming in from Georgetown and BJ Edwards coming in from Tennessee. Both of these guys were high recruits that didn't get much playing time at their respective schools. But the potential on this team, of course, that's the word that gets coaches fired. But this team is potentially a top 3 team in the conference, I believe.
Well, there's only one spot because Memphis and FAU are going to take over those top 2. So there's only one more spot for that top 3, which in my opinion, it's that top tier is Memphis and FAU. And there's quite a bit of room between everybody else. But hey, who knows? They could certainly be third. And I agree with you. I like these guys coming in. The guys they have coming back are solid at the very least. With Zurich Phillips coming back, Tyreek Smith, their defense should be improved and certainly should be there. But I like some of these wild cards. I like Denver Anglin and BJ Edwards, who couldn't really hit the court at their respective schools coming in. I think you're absolutely right. Them transferring down a level. Play here, I think it'd work out for them. So I think you're absolutely right. I like the potential that they have. But then again, like SMU wasn't very good last year. It was first year with a new coach. But I think if everything breaks for them and guys like Denver Anglin can play and can be productive for them, and they can go maybe 8-9 guys deep, I think you're looking at a damn good team in this conference. I think you're absolutely right. Year 2, Rob Lanier could be a big jump for the Mustangs.
Right. So now we move on. There's only 2 teams left to talk about, and neither of them were very good last year. Tulsa basically loses anyone who was productive last year, including their leading scorer, Sam Griffin, who went to Wyoming. So I personally don't believe Tulsa has anybody on the roster, from last year that is significant. But if you look at the people they brought in a ton of people, and some of these guys were highly productive, including the tandem of Kobe Williams and Keaston Willis from Louisiana Tech. Williams is a point guard. He averaged 19 points per game last year, third in CUSA. Also, 2 steals per game, second in CUSA. Willis made 83 pointers last year, fifth in CUSA, shot 38%. They also bring in Isaiah Barnes, a former high recruit forward from Michigan. And so other guys, I guess notable, I won't list everybody, but they bring in a couple of interesting freshmen in Matt Reed, a power forward, Jared Hall, another power forward. Muhammad Keita comes in from St. John's. He's a center. PJ Haggerty, a shooting guard from TCU, didn't get much playing time there. Chauncey Gibson, a wing from Clemson, also didn't get a heck of a lot of playing time. But, they definitely have some interesting pieces, a lot of guys to gel coming from all over the place. But yeah, I mean, they should have at least, at a minimum, have really good guard play with Kobe Williams and Keaston Willis.
Yeah, and they're going to need that because this team was very, very bad last year. This team was not good at all, man. But a big time for Eric Conkle to bring in 2 of his guys at Louisiana Tech who know how he wants to play and were very, very productive last year and while he was there as well. So I think there's some marked improvement, I guess. This is still not going to be a very good team given that they're bringing in a whole bunch of new guys.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, not seeing it for Tulsa this year. And I like these guys. I like Keaston Willis and Kobe Williams as scorers, but this team still isn't going to be very good. They're just not. But being at Tulsa and Eric Conkle taking this job, this was not going to be a short fix. He's here for the long haul. That's what this program is going to be. So I think we're still looking at a little bit of time here before Eric Conkle potentially makes anything out of this. But yeah, this year, sure, they'll be better. But with the teams coming in this conference, they're still not going to be a high finish at all. They're going to be toward the bottom, if not right at the bottom.
Right. And speaking of having a bare cupboard, Texas San Antonio, they lose their 5 best players, all of them going to different schools, some of which we mentioned or will mention when we get to the A-10, including probably their best player from last year, Jay Medor, who's going to Fordham, Jacob Germany going to Wichita, John Buggs going to North Texas. And their best returning player is, Christian Tucker, 8th last year in terms of minutes, was pretty efficient in terms of offense. But and I'm not really excited about the guys coming in either. I suppose the guy I like the most is Adante Holloman. He had his season shortened last year because of injury, started 12 of 24 games. He's pretty efficient, offensively, 45 from the field, 44 from deep. Played 21 minutes a game, and it was about 2.5 3-point attempts. Also solid from the line, 71. And he's probably, the guy I'm most excited. He's also a point guard and pretty productive in terms of assists last year, playing limited minutes. He 3 assists to 2.3 turnovers. The turnovers a little high, but I just don't see a lot here beside maybe Christian Tucker and Hoyleman.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think if Tulsa is not going to finish in the basement in this league, then it's the Roadrunners that are going to do so. Welcome back. First of all, welcome back, Jordan Ivy Curry, after a quick vacation year, I guess, at Pacific, where I'm sure the views were very nice there, and it was very nice to be on the coast of California. He's now back at UTSA, where he spent his first 2 years. But yeah, with all these, with their 5 best players leaving, returning 1 guy, Now Jordan Ivy Carey's been there, so I guess it's like kind of weird. It's like guys that trying to think, like Kudus Wahab, I think did that. No, did he go from Georgetown, Maryland, and then back to Georgetown? Like, you know what I mean? It's kind of guys like that. It's like, okay, well, do you count as a transfer if they've already been here with the same head coach? But regardless, losing a lot here, jumping into a way better conference.
But Wahab actually looked worse. I mean, he was a solid player at Georgetown. I thought he was solid at Maryland. Then when he went back to Georgetown, his game seemed to take a dive. But Georgetown was a mess. So
yeah. But regardless, like Roadrunners are losing a lot here. They're dumping up in competition with the conference. This is my seller team. Sadly, somebody's got to finish last. This is the team that's going to do it.
Yeah, I think so. I agree. All right, Jake. So we got to make our picks for the American. I know you've kind of made it clear who you like already, but any final thoughts on who's gonna win the conference?
Well, I did mention that I like FAU, and it's a 2-horse race between FAU and Memphis. It's them, and there's quite a bit of room, I think, between them and whoever the third best team in this league is going to be. But I'm going to go with FAU. I think it's a good like rivalry kind of in this conference that they're going to play each other twice or once or twice in the regular season. They're probably going to be on a collision course to play in the American Conference Tournament Championship game. But this team seems very connected. This doesn't seem like a flash in the pan team that's getting selfish. Nobody transferred. They only had the one guy graduate, Michael Forrest. And I think Dusty May is a hell of a coach. I think these guys are dead set on trying to get to another Final Four. They're certainly a team that can do it. They have a little bit of size with Bolden and Rosado. They can shoot. They can spread the floor. Really, really like this team. So I'm going to go with FAU because they have there's probably not a team in America that has as much continuity coming back next year as FAU does. No. And now Memphis is losing a lot. Memphis now, the talent is undeniable, and every year Penny Hardaway's been there, the talent has been incredible. But it's just, are they going to be able to gel? It takes until usually the end of the season for them to really hit their stride and really gel and get hot at the right time. But because of that, I'm going to take FAU. The continuity, the coach, regardless of them moving up to a new conference, they're built for this. They're built for another deep run of the tournament. I think they're going to win the American in their first year. Right.
It's hard to argue with that, but I'm going to. What I'm going to say, beside their two big guys, they're really all guards, all 6'4" and under. And they got through the tournament, and interestingly enough, in our March Madness preview, myself and maybe you or someone else, I think, agreed with me that Memphis had a shot at the Final Four. It was actually FAU that got to the Final Four because they beat Memphis. And controversially, not many people bring this up, but there was a foul at the end of the game that wasn't called, a clear foul. But anyway, and then even after nipping Memphis, they definitely didn't have an easy run of it. Most of their games were close in the tournament, and that's even with Fairleigh Dickinson doing them a favor by knocking off Purdue. So with Memphis, though, we have some question marks. As much as we talked about their incoming talent, number one on our list was Mikey Williams. Well, Mikey Williams was arrested over the summer, and he is yet to enroll into Memphis. So his status for the season is very much in the air. His preliminary hearing was postponed for the third time just a few days ago. So we don't know whether they're going to see their best incoming freshman. Also, their best returning player, DeAndre Williams, has yet to get a waiver. And that's not looking very good at this point because we were supposed to hear a decision and we haven't yet. His argument seems to be kind of not really a good one, or a great one, I should say. But I just had this feeling he's not going to get the waiver. So, but still, we're bringing in what would probably be their starting lineup of Javon Quinterly, Caleb Mills, David Jones, Jaquan Walton, and Jordan Brown. And that is, there's 2 5-stars in there. David Jones and Mills. I mean, Mills won Freshman of the Year in this conference 4 years ago. Walton is the highest returning guy in terms of per and plus minus. And I think David Jones actually has a chance to be an all-conference type player too. And then you throw in like a steady guy like Nick Jourdain. And the other thing is, and I don't know if we mentioned this at the top, but in addition to JT Taylor, who is a top 100 freshman, they have 2 other freshmen that are very close to being top 100 guys, and then Jonathan Pierre, who we interviewed. So there are plenty of other options on this team. And so I'm going to go with Memphis's overwhelming talent over the continuity of FAU. But I love your logic. This is a really good team, FAU. And I think it's going to be really fun, especially given that they met in the first round of the NCAA tournament. That kind of kicked off or tipped off the rivalry. In terms of the rest of the teams, I like SMU, to rebound and surge up to third in this conference. And I think Tulane, North Texas, and Rice will all also be in the mix for third. And so that gives this conference a half a dozen good teams. So I think the conference is in good shape despite the departures. And I think it's going to be fun. They're going to probably have 2 top 25 teams in this conference. All right. So how many selections do you think this conference gets to the NCAA, Jake?
Well, I know for a fact that 2 are going to make it there, and I think those are the only 2 that are going to make it. FAU and Memphis are in a tier of their own in this conference, and then there's everybody else that you can put in whatever tiers you'd like. They are the 2 best teams in this conference. Like I said, they're going to play during the regular season, and I believe they're on a collision course to give us a really good game on that Sunday that the bracket comes out in the AAC championship game. So there's 2, like I said, it's 2 teams in FAU and Memphis, and it's everybody else. They're absolute locks to make this tournament. Those are the only 2 from the AAC that will be there.
Right. I, too, predict 2 teams make the NCAA tournament, and the same ones as you do. However, let's assume that Memphis does have everybody and is as dominant as we expect. I mean, we're talking about 2 teams that could maybe, go into, the NCAA with like maybe, or the conference tournament. They might go into the conference tournament with maybe like 4 losses each, and if that's the case, if one of them would lose to a Tulane or Rice or North Texas in the tournament, I think they're going to get in, and the conference tourney team would get in as well. And I don't think it's out of the question that a team like Tulane, could win the conference tournament, and and then the conference would get 3. All right, let's talk player of the year. Who do you like there, Jake?
So I think the player of the year, and I'll give you who I think it's going to be, and then I'll give you a sleeper that I think you have listed as well. But this FAU team, if they finish first, and I get they seem to be very connected, not very selfish, which is why they think they're going to have the success they do. But if they finish first, which I believe they will in the regular season, I'm going to go with a guy from FAU, and I believe it's going to be John L. Davis. We're not going to have a situation where I remember Zeke Elliott's rookie year where him and Dak Prescott were going off, but it was 2 rookies that were like leading the Cowboys. They were like, oh, the whole offensive line for the great offensive line for the Cowboys should win MVP this year. They'll give it to 5 guys. Like we can give it to FAU's like starting 5 because they're so good and play so well together. But that player of the year will be the best player from the best team, and I'm going to say that it's John L. Davis from Florida Atlantic. But I think Eric Gaines, now that he's going to be the number 1 option for UAB, if they have a solid season where they finish top 4, top 5 here, I think Eric Gaines could be a sneaky player of the year pick here.
All right. I'm going to go with Tulane's Jalen Forbes. I mentioned all his tremendous stats. The guy just lights it up. And I think that Davis and Elijah Martin will cancel each other out. I think the same will likely apply to Mikey Williams and Javon Quinterly for Memphis. I think Eric Gaines and South Florida's Chris Youngblood are going to have huge years. But I think their teams are probably going to be middle of the pack at best. And so with that said, you got to look toward the top of the conference. And that's why I'm going with Jalen Forbes. All right. So now we'll move on to the Atlantic 10. And I'll just review a little bit what happened last season. Virginia Commonwealth, or more commonly known as VCU, won the regular season title by finishing 3 games ahead of 3 other teams that were tied for second. That was Fordham, Dayton, and St. Louis. VCU defeated Dayton in the A-10 tourney and advanced to the NCAAs. Now, typically, the A-10 sends more than one team to the big dance, but VCU was the only team to go. And they lost a fairly close contest to St. Mary's in the first round. And surprisingly, no A-10 team was invited to the NIT. Pretty surprising, especially given that Dayton was a preseason top 25 team. They were hampered by injuries all season long, and then they seemed to kind of get it together at the end of the season. And they were clearly, I think, by then the second best team in the conference, but no NIT bids. All right, and in terms of the top offensive team in the conference, George Washington led the league in points per game at 76.3. Also had an excellent effective field goal percentage of 53.2 for GW, while St. Louis topped the A-10 in offensive efficiency. Top defensive team was Dayton. They were 10th in the nation, only allowed 61 points per game, and they were closely followed by VCU, who only allowed 62.9, which was 24th in Division I. So VCU led the A-10 in defensive efficiency. They were 9th in the country, followed by Dayton and then Fordham. In terms of pace, UMass played with the fastest pace in the A-10, while Dayton was one of the slowest, 14th slowest in the country, in fact. Again, slow-paced teams, that's going to keep down the opponent's scoring numbers. So sometimes those stats can be a little deceiving. If you play at a slow pace, your opponents probably aren't going to score a lot, no matter how good or bad your defense is. In a conference that lacks shooting, Duquesne topped the A-10 in 3-point percentage at 36.6. Dayton led the league in rebounding percentage because they were a really big team last year. They were 27th in the country in rebound percentage. VCU topped the A-10 in steal percentage, 13th in the nation, and block percentage, 26th in Division I. Dayton led the A-10 in assist percentage, 11th in the country. One of the reasons why is they were a big team and guys needed to be fed the ball. And so that helped boost their assist percentage. Davidson had the lowest turnover percentage in the league, while Loyola Chicago, traditionally a very well coached and not turnover prone team, but they had the highest in the conference turnover rate at 19.7, which was the 5th worst in the nation. So Jake, how about coaching changes?
So yeah, we only have 2. There's certainly a lot of conferences that had a lot more, but even for the A-10, they had quite a few last season. This season, though, not so much. So Mike Rhodes, who's from Schuylkill County in Pennsylvania, he's leaving VCU to coach for Penn State. And he's being replaced by Utah State's Ryan Odom, one of my favorite hires of this offseason. Next is Kim English. Left George Mason after 2 seasons to go to Providence to replace Ed Cooley. I think it's a big swing for Providence. Kim English was 34 and 29 in 2 years at George Mason. He's known as a really, really good recruiter. But coaching-wise, it's like, hey, you're taking a big swing if you're Providence for a guy like that who's only had 2 years of head coaching experience to now coach against the likes of Sean Miller and Rick Pitino and Danny Hurley and Thad Matta and Shaka Smart. But he's being replaced by Tony Skinn, who played at George Mason under Jim Larinaga when they made the Final Four. So one of George Mason's very own coming back. But yeah, only 2 coaching changes, but one especially in Ryan Odom that I think is going to be good right away, and in the long term is going to build VC. It's going to continue VCU's lineage of really good head coaches that have been there.
Right. And we're going to start off by talking about Ryan Odom's team, because we'll talk about these teams in the order that they finished last year. And VCU loses a bunch of players. Of course, Player of the Year and Defensive Player of the Year in the A-10, point guard Ace Baldwin is following his coach to Penn State, along with athletic wing Nick Kern. Jaden Nunn is going to Baylor, shooting guard, combo guard, going to Baylor. Brandon Johns, big man, he graduated. Jalen Deloach goes to Georgia. Jameer Watkins, kind of an underachieving but very athletic forward, is going to Florida State. And also they lose David Shriver. Coming back is basically 3 guys with upside, but really didn't see much action. In fact, I don't know if Christian Furman played at all last year, but what they have coming in, what they have coming back is wing Fats Bullops and, as I said, center Christian Furman. Both of these guys were high-level recruits from last year who didn't see much of the floor. They also have Zeb Jackson, a transfer from Michigan, who also didn't get a ton of playing time last year, but he too was a high recruit before he at Michigan before he transferred over. Now, what's coming in, not surprisingly, is 2 of Utah State's stars, combo guard Matt Shulga and Sean Bairstow, a forward. These are 2 talented players, and I'm especially high on Shulga. Also coming in, Roosevelt Wheeler, a big man from Louisville, and he's big. And they also have Joe Bomasil, and who's been all over the place, started at Virginia Tech. Then he went to George Washington, where he averaged about 17 points a game. Then he came to Oklahoma. He went back. He didn't really see the court much. And they also have Jason Nelson coming in from a conference rival, Richmond. He's a small point guard. So right there, they kind of have, just with their 5 incoming guys, theoretically, not that I don't know if Nelson's going to be starting, but they already have like a starting 5 right there. And then, of course, like I said, they have the 3 youngsters with upside returning. So what do you make of VCU?
They also have Kwani coming in from California. Now the Golden Bears were horrific last year, but he's another guy with some college experience that's coming in. I like this team because I like the way that Ryan Odom is going to play, and when he brings in Max Shulga and Sean Bairstow, who should be 2 of the better players in this conference anyway, to come play his system, that know how to do it, and that transition will be a little bit easier. In the long term, I really like Ryan Odom here. In the short term, I think they'll be a good team. I think they're top 5, maybe top 3. I don't know if I'm ready to anoint them number 1 quite yet, but and the thing about Ryan Odom coming here is it's weird. It's kind of odd because he's going to play a totally different style than what you think of VCU being. You think of VCU being a big-time defensive team. They want to get after you, press, create havoc, cause chaos, get easy baskets, because the offensive end playing a slow half-court game is not really what they want. But he's going to play a fast-paced offense. They're going to shoot a lot of threes. The ball movement is going to be terrific. They're going to run really good off-ball stuff to get shooters open and really give the shooters the ultimate green light in Shulga and Bairstow here. So really like this team this year, though they will certainly be toward the top of the league. Not ready to call them the best team just yet, but they will be up there. I really like them. They might have a shot to make the tournament as well. However, we talked about waivers a couple times in the show. Joe Bomasil is going to need one. He is going to need one because he just left Oklahoma again. That, to me, is another kind of big swing piece like we talked about with guys getting waivers. when you have a guy like that who's played in the A-10 that's got plenty of college experience, getting a guy like that to come play right away is huge. So certainly a top 5 team can be moved up depending on the status of Bill Bamseal's waiver.
Yeah. Like I said, at GW, he lit it up, but did not do so as a freshman at Virginia Tech or as a junior at Oklahoma. And by the way, I just want to correct myself. Both Furman and Fats Billups did see the court a little bit last year. Not a lot. As I said, they were freshmen behind a very experienced, starting lineup. So we move on to Fordham, and Fordham loses 2 high-level scorers in Khalid Moore, who moved on to the pros, and Darius Quisenberry. These two, Quisenberry averaged 17 points per game last year, and Khalid Moore averaged 16. Nobody else on the team averaged more than 8 points per game. So those guys are big losses. Who is coming back is combo guard Antrell Charlton, shooting guard Kyle Rose, Abdou Sambilla, a center, and he is the conference's leading returner in terms of rebounding percentage and block percentage. So some potential there. They also have coming in from the portal, they have Jay Medor, a point guard from Texas San Antonio, who I mentioned earlier in the program. I'll just tell you a little bit about Jay. Jay is a 6-foot point guard who averaged 13.7 points per game last year. Shooting splits were not ideal. 41 from the floor, 31 from deep, 71 from the free throw line. But he also chipped in close to 4 assists per game and 1.5 steals per game. So Jay is a 30-minute averaged over 30 minutes per game last year, so a very experienced player coming in. And they also have wing Josh Rivera coming in from Lafayette. So what do you make of Fordham? I think they were a little, how are they going to survive without Khalid Moore and Darius Quisenberry?
Yeah, a really good year for Keith Ergo, one of the best Fordham had had in a while. Their non-conference slate wasn't great, and I think their record's a little inflated because of that. But they did well in conference. They did. Guy I want to highlight coming back, they got a sophomore guard who played really well as a freshman named Will Richardson from North Jersey. Came in and played really well last year up the bench, had a big-time shot to win the game at LaSalle last year. And I like what they're bringing back. Sambilla is going to be great, a big body to rebound and block shots inside, one of the better inside guys in this conference. Kyle Rose with some experience, Charlton as well. I really like what this team has. And you know what's funny about this team? When you think of Fordham, and you think when they had like Jeff, what was his name? Jeff Neubauer, who was there before they hired Kyle Neptune. They didn't have anybody at these games. They had a great home court advantage last year at Rose Hill Gym. And this was a place that was actually really, really tough to play. And I know during the A-10 tournament, LaSalle had to play 2 games before they had played Fordham. They beat Rhode Island. They beat Duquesne. They had to play Fordham. It was basically a Fordham home game at the Barclays Center. And I think that and then playing 3 games in 3 days was LaSalle's demise. But a really good home court here. A lot of guys coming back. Now losing Khalid Moore is tough. But I like some of the guys that bring it in Medor and Josh Rivera. I like what this team has. I don't think they're going to be as good, but certainly Keith Ergo has a team that's going to finish top half in this conference.
All righty. So now we'll talk about Dayton. As I said, they were a preseason top 25 team last year. We were all pretty excited about them. We had Deron Holmes on the show. And then they were kind of derailed by injuries. They got off to a slow start. I even think before the injuries. I think I'm guessing here, but I think it kind of weighed on them, the expectations that were on this team last year. So what they lost was Tamani Kamara to the NBA, Mustafa Amzil, another forward, to New Mexico, RJ Blakely, a wing, went to Old Dominion, and Mike Shavajant, the freshman last year, he transferred to San Francisco. So who do they have coming back? Well, they have the aforementioned Deron Holmes. He is the conference's leading returner for free throws made at 158, though I will say he's not a great free throw shooter at 67%. He's also the leading returning rebounder at 8.1 rebounds per game, leading shot blocker 1.9, also the leader in terms of per, win shares, and plus minus. So definitely a all conference. He was all conference last year, probably will be again this year. And they also have Malachi Smith, and he was one of the players that was dinged up last year, and he's the conference's leading returner in assists at 5.6 per game. Excellent little passer. Could improve as a shooter, but still a very talented point guard. And they also have two shooters coming back in Kobe Ellis, Elvis, who is a combo guard, and Kobe Bray, a wing, who's probably their best three-point shooter. Both of those guys missed significant time last year with injuries. Incoming from the portal, or from I should say, not just the portal. They have two freshmen coming in. They have Marvell Allen, a shooting guard. He's the top 150 player. And they also have Juan Simon, a wing, coming in, another three-star freshman. They also have center Isaiah Jack, who's a legit center. Big man coming in from Buffalo. Didn't play a ton for Buffalo, I believe. Let's see. He's 6'11", 250. He started 11 of 31 games for them. And he only played 16 minutes per game, but very, very efficient around the basket, good rebounder, decent shot blocker. But the best guy coming in my opinion, is Enoch Cheeks, a point guard from Robert Morris. Very productive all-around player, just 6'3" guard. Last year for Robert Morris, he averaged close to 13 points per game. Shooting splits were 45, 36, and 79. Chipped in 4.4 rebounds, 3.5 assists, 1.8 steals, and 1.3 blocks for a guard. This guy contributes in a lot of different ways, and I think he's going to be a nice addition to this team. The one thing that is, to me, is pretty obvious, as we said, Dayton played at a slow pace last year, fed their big men. And I think what you're going to see this year is, I think most likely the starting lineup is going to be Deron Holmes at center. And, he played center last year, but Kamara and he were kind of interchangeable. But this year, I think the rest of the starting lineup is going to be Cheeks, Malachi Smith, Kobe Elvis, and Kobe Bray. So they're really going to be playing four guards and one big. I believe that's how the starting lineup is going to shake out. And their two best players coming off the bench will probably be the freshman Allen and Isaac Jack, the center coming in from Buffalo.
Yeah, so I think Dayton will certainly be toward the top again. Deron Holmes, once again, probably going to be a lot of people's preseason player of the year, and could definitely win it this year with no Ace Baldwin. Here's my thing with this team. Now all these guys are going to be juniors, and now it's going to be like, hey, like you remember last year, it's like, hey, they have Deron Holmes, they have Smith, they have Elvis, they have Bray, they have all these guys, Amziel, Blakeney. It's like they're all going to have another year together. They're all still young, but this is their second year playing together. Like they should be able to gel and be fine. Injuries don't help. When you miss a Malachi Smith and you miss a Kobe Elvis for a little bit, that can become a problem with continuity and guys being able to get into a rhythm on the court. But like this is the third year where I thought Dayton has a team that can make the tournament, and that hasn't happened. Last year, they dropped some games I thought they should have won. They lose, obviously, to VCU in the A-10 championship game to spoil the bid. The year, and I don't know if you know of what happened, not last year, the year before. This team was screaming hot going into the tournament. And they were like, oh, they're a bubble team. Here comes Dayton. They're playing their way on. And it wasn't until they went up to North Philadelphia, they went to 20th and only. And then Ashley Howard's last home game as the head coach of LaSalle knocked off Dayton, burst their bubble, and that loss put them out. So I think this team has a lot to prove this year. It will certainly be toward the top again, but this is a big year for Anthony Grant, Rich. You could make the argument they really should have made the tournament the last 2 years. I feel like you got to make it with this one. And if you don't win the conference tournament, you got to get an at-large here. They got to make it this year. They have to. Big year for Deron Holmes. Big year for Anthony Grant. They'll certainly be toward the top again, but is the health going to be there? You know the defense will, but can they stay healthy? And are they going to be able to be consistent now that you have some of these guys that are now going to be upperclassmen? So that's the big question for Dayton. That slow pace, almost a North Texas-esque pace they like to play at and grind it down in the half court. But big year for Anthony Grant, big year for Dayton as a program, because I really thought that Obi Toppin team was like, hey, it's going to set them up to be a powerhouse mid-major. They'll be making the tournament consistently. They'll win games. Ever since then, it hasn't happened. So this is a big year for Anthony Grant because they need to make the tournament.
Yeah. So unfortunate, the COVID year, with the year they beat Kansas, or did they take Kansas to overtime? But they did have some big wins. They were going to be a number one seed in the NCAA tournament, and then it was canceled. I actually think they're going to play at a little faster pace this year. With a more guard-oriented lineup, but we shall see. All right, so now we move on to St. Louis, and they lost a bunch of good players. Yuri Collins, one of the best passers in the country, went on to the pros. Javante Perkins, athletic wing, also graduated. Francis Okoro, big man, strong, good shot blocker, moves on to the pros, and also Javon Pickett. So really what's left for this team is Gibson Jimerson, who's a excellent three-point shooter, and a shooting guard. He's a wing, Jimerson, and shooting guard Sincere Parker also returns. In terms of incoming from the portal, not a lot coming in. They have Bradley Azawiro from Georgetown coming in, and combo guard Mike Meadows coming in from Portland. St. Louis looks to be definitely going to be taking a significant step back.
Yeah, Rich, I think there's a chance that this team definitely finishes toward the bottom. I think there's a chance that they take a huge step back. Because, look, Yuri Collins was not the best point guard in the country last year. But assist-wise, I mean, in the last handful of seasons, has there been somebody better than him?
No.
I mean, he could run an offense as good as anybody. He was terrific passing. The numbers were great. When you have a guy like Gibson Jimerson off the ball as a sharpshooter that you can give the ball to, who's got a quick release, who can knock down shots, going to make you look good. But that's going to affect Jimerson now. Now he's not going to have a point guard that he's on the same that he had the type of rapport with that can feed him and get him open. They don't have Francis Okoro. They're going to bring in Azawiro, who played on some bad Georgetown teams and had to back up Kudus Wahab. This team's going to take a significant step back, in my opinion. They lose Javon Pickett. They also lose Fred Batch as well, who they kind of had to deal with his loss in the middle of the season because he had a knee injury and then said, you know what, like I'm just going to medically retire from basketball. So they don't have him anymore. They bring in Tim Dalger from Tulsa, but he's another guy, like was on a really bad team last year. Like I don't know how much you can just say, hey, here's a bunch of guys that didn't get a ton of playing time. Maybe the production's not there. And it's like they have to step into a role for us that we had really experienced guys that produced a ton last year. Like literally Yuri Collins is one of the best assist guys in college basketball the last however many years. And now you don't have him. I think this team takes a significant step back, Rich. And at the same time, are you ready for this? I think that seat of Travis Ford's might be heating up a little bit because much like Dayton the last few years, the Billikens have had teams that are certainly NCAA tournament worthy, and they haven't been able to get it done either.
Yeah, I agree. So next on our list is George Mason. Of course, they have the coaching change, and the coach is taking several players. Kim English is taking several players with him to Providence, including Josh Adoro, leading scorer, and also Javonte Gaines, a forward, pretty fairly athletic. He former Tennessee transfer. And speaking of Tennessee transfers, Victor Bailey played for George Mason last year. He moves on to the pros, and Devon Cooper, also a significant contributor, he graduated. So they had 4 double-digit scores last year, and only one of those guys returns, and that's Ronald Polite, combo guard. They also have Malik Henry, who didn't play a ton last year. Henry averaged only about 12 minutes per game. He was pretty effective from the field, but he's not a shooter. So he's power forward. So as far as who's coming to George Mason, they have five different guys of note, but only one really, to me, is probably guaranteed to be a very productive player, and that's Darius Maddox, a wing, athletic wing from Virginia Tech. I'm not exactly sure what happened with Darius last year. He kind of, I know eventually he left the team. I forget what it was, to be honest, but at the time he was considered their 6th man, but also there have been other times where he's definitely started. And I think he'll be probably this team's best player. The other guys come in are Woody Newton, a forward from Oklahoma State, power forward Keyshawn Hall from UNLV, Nicholas Pavarotti, a center from Central Michigan, and they also have freshman Austin Ball coming in. He's a 3-star guy. He's a small forward. So George Mason, too, another team losing a lot in this conference.
Yeah, and that includes their coach as well. And like I mentioned, Tony Skinn comes in, who made the Final Four here and is an alum of the school. Probably another long-term fix here. They are like Darius Maddox coming in there. I think will have a better year than he did last year. Had a career low in 3-point percentage. I think will get up now that he'll be a focal point for a team in the Atlantic 10. Woody Newton's going to need a waiver coming from Oklahoma State and Syracuse, so not sure that he's going to end up playing this year. That could be another swing guy, but to lose a guy like Adoro in the paint, to lose a guy like Victor Bailey, who was a 5th year, to bring on a bunch of transfers now and a first-year head coach, middle toward the bottom for me, for George Mason. But I will say, and I don't know if you agree with me, Rich, because like I said, like when I prefaced the coaching change here, Kim English was only 34 and 29 here in 2 years. They didn't really come close to making any tournaments. I think their best finish is maybe 5th or 6th in the A-10. Like I don't think the coaching drop off is like crazy. Like I don't view this as like completely starting over. Now they don't have Kim. The only downside is Kim English, being a hell of a recruiter, was able to bring in guys that are now going to play in the Big East and probably be pretty productive. But I don't see this as like a complete tear it down. Like, oh, they're losing some great coach or whatnot. He just hasn't proven that yet.
Mm-hmm.
No, I don't see like, oh, like there's going to be a big drop off in coaching here, which is going to hurt him. I just think it's the guys leaving that were so good in this conference. That's the main thing. So middle toward the bottom for you. I don't know if you feel the same way, but I don't think the coaching difference from Kim English to what we think Tony Skinn will be is like a very wide gap.
Yeah, I think their biggest thing is just a lack of talent right now. That's going to be their biggest thing to overcome. So moving on to Duquesne. This team brings back their 2 leading scorers, but before that, I'll talk about who they're losing. They're losing Tevin Brewer, RJ Gunn, Joe Reese, and Austin Rotroff, all to graduation. But their top 2 scorers, Dede Grant and Jimmy Clark, are returning. Grant is a point guard. Clark is a combo guard. Grant last year averaged 15.5 points per game and launched 7.1 threes per game and made them at a 40% clip, also 87% from the free throw line. He's a small little guy, but he can fill it up. Clark is kind of the opposite. He's more of a defensive player. He is a combo guard. He is the leading returner in the conference in steals. In fact, I'm pretty sure he led the conference last year in steals, 2.3 per game. They also bring back power forward Trey Williams and power forward David Dixon. Incoming is Andrei Sarasov, a small forward for Georgia Southern, who was pretty productive last year. I believe is a freshman. Let me just check on that, but I think he was a very productive. He's from Russia, and I stand corrected. He was not a freshman. He's actually a super senior now. But he played 30 minutes per game last year from Georgia with very nice shooting splits. He averaged 14.3 points per game, shot 50% from the field, 36% from deep, 69% from the free throw line, chipped in 7.3 rebounds per game, and 1.3 steals per game. This kid goes 6'7", so he's kind of a combo forward. Should be a productive player for Duquesne. Bring in the Drame brothers, Fusini and Hassan, who played at LaSalle last year, but they actually earned some fame when they played for St. Peter's, when St. Peter's made the run in the NCAA tournament. They are both forwards. So a lot of size on this team to complement the two high-level guards that are coming back. A lot of size on this team, actually.
Yeah, a whole lot of size. The question is with guard play, like besides Day Grant, besides Jimmy Clark, what are we kind of looking at here? They're going to be young at that position besides these two guys. And when you miss Tevin Brewer, it's good that you have a guy like Day Grant who can really fill it up, who proved he could do that in the A-10 as well as Miami, Ohio, where he was before he transferred to Duquesne for Keith Dambrot. But I like these guys coming in. They have Mahorsich, a really big center from NC State. I like these Drame twins a lot. Saw them play a lot at LaSalle. They're scrappy. They can play small ball 4 and 5 if you ask them to. They can shoot it a little bit. They can rebound. They're just hustlers. That's what they are. They're going to, you know what they're going to give you. They're going to give you 100% every single time they're out there on both ends. Sometimes it's not pretty when they have to play the 4 and the 5 and really, you don't really, these aren't really guys that you want putting the ball on the floor. You want them to cut. You want them to shoot when they're open. And just rebound, make winning plays, hustle. That's what you want them to do. And to me, the guys like that fit on any team that are just gonna make winning plays and hustle and give you 100%. So I like the team Keith Dambrot has here. They'll certainly finish toward the top again. I believe they were the 6th seed in the A-10 tournament last year. Certainly think they'll be higher this year in that 3 to 5 range for sure. But it's the guard depth for me that's a problem, but certainly a ton of size. Certainly a ton of size on this team that's going to be a big advantage for them. But besides Day Grant, besides Jimmy Clark, one gets hurt, one gets in foul trouble. You know, what's the kind of contingency plan at guard here? But lots of like for Keith Dambrot. Remember 2 years ago, they won like 4 or 5 games? They were horrible. That was just kind of a one-off thing. They were very good last year. They got upset by LaSalle in the first round of the tournament, but they certainly could have went on farther and potentially won. And they have another team that will be right there this year. I really like Duquesne, really like Keith Dambrot as a coach. I don't think he gets enough love, but this will be a team that's top 5 in this conference for sure. Even with the losses at guard, all those big guys is really going to be a handful for teams, especially in this conference, to deal with every night.
Yeah, and defensively, I think it's going to be hard to score in that.
Yeah, exactly. To have all these bigs, and I'm telling you, those Drames are going to be big to help you be a little more versatile with your lineups. If you want to play small a little bit, you can kind of spread the floor while they're there. You can play them at the 3 and the 4, the 4 and the 5. I think they're actually going to be like a pretty underrated get here for the Duke.
Right. All right. So now we move on to George Washington, and they lose some key players, including Brendan Adams last year, who threw down over 17 points per game. Now, keep in mind, this was the best offensive team in the conference last year. They also lose Ricky Lindo, a pretty talented wing forward type, who was also a double-digit scorer. The Hunter Dean moves on to LSU, and Noel Brown moves on to St. Bonaventure. At the same time, still have firepower, though, including the leading returning scorer in the conference, James Bishop, a point guard who averaged 21.6 points per game last year. He wasn't an efficient scorer. In fact, he was only 30% from deep, even though he attempted almost 7 per game. But he is a good foul shooter, so maybe he can turn that around. But he also was productive in terms of assists per game, 5.2. So a lot to be happy about there. They also returned Freshman of the Year Maximus Edwards, who was more efficient. He was also a double-digit scorer. George Washington had 4 of them last year. So 2 returned, 2 were gone. But Edwards averaged 10.5 points per game, shot 43 from the floor, 35 from deep. Also chipped in 6.5 rebounds per game, which is nice. So those are the 2 main guys coming back. And they also have a host of incoming guys. And I would say topping the list would be Jacoy Hutchinson, a combo guard. Incoming freshman 3-star guy. Also have Christian Jones, a shooting guard, 3-star guy. And then they have 3 seldom used players from big time programs. They have Darren Buchanan coming in, a forward from Virginia Tech, Benny Schroeder, a small forward coming in from Oklahoma, and Baba Tundi, Akin Bola, a center from Auburn. All of these guys are coming in from high-level programs but don't have much experience.
Yeah, this team now, I think for year one in Chris Caputo's tenure, solid season. But this team was not deep at all. And now they're losing 4 guys from last year that played quite a bit. So they're going to be young. Like you said, Darren Buchanan, Benny Schroeder. I think Benny Schroeder is actually going to be probably the best group of these newcomers coming in to come play. GW coming from Oklahoma. He's going to be a player for this team. He's going to have to be, because if there's 368 teams in D1, this team is 359 in bench minutes. They did not have a bench. And in year one of a new coach at a small program, it's probably going to be that way. But to lose Brendan Adams, who is kind of like Robin, James Bishop's Batman, who is terrific. James Bishop can score with the best of them, a bit of a chucker, but my God, when he's got it going on, it's hard to stop this guy. I mean, the quickness with the ball in his hands, the shooting, the step back threes and moves off the bounce. Like, he's really, really tough. And he's going to continue to score in buckets because they're going to need him to again. And Maximus Edwards is really good. But now, like, they're going to need some bigs. I think Akinbola is going to have to step into a big role here after being buried on the depth chart last year at Auburn, because Hunter Dean, I'm a little surprised that Hunter Dean is ended up at LSU. I saw that and was like,
Yeah.
He's like an in-demand SEC player.
Right.
Noel Brown is now going to back up Chad Benning at St. Bonaventure in conference. But it's just a lot of questions with, okay, we're bringing in some transfers that didn't play a ton, and we're going to be a lot younger. We were deep to begin with. Who replaces all that production and the production that we had at that? So step back in year number 2 for George Washington. Also to mention that, with Hunter Dean and Noel Brown, this was not a great defensive team. They just weren't. Middle of the road, I guess, as far as block percentage with the big guys. That's another thing they're going to have to worry about. So not a great defensive team, not a deep team, and some major questions with the guys they have on the way out. So step back here for GW. But I can tell you one thing that's going to happen. If the team takes a step back, what's not going to take a step back is James Bishop scoring the ball, because he's going to have to. He's going to have all the chances that he wants.
Right. All right, now we move on to Davidson. Again, they're losing their top 2 scorers, and big guy Sam Menenga, who moved on to the Australian NBL a year early. He didn't have to. He still had more eligibility. And combo guard Foster Lawyer. Those guys last year, Lawyer averaged 16.3 points per game. Menenga 15.2. Nobody else averaged double figures. And of three of their four top scorers, Menenga, Lawyer, and Des Watson, who's going to Loyola Chicago, are gone. Who's returning is Grant Huffman, a combo guard. He was the other guy. He averaged 9.4 per game last year. He was he and Watson tied for third on the team in scoring. They also have Connor Cucharera, a wing, Reed Bailey, a power forward, David Skogman, another power forward. Those guys come back, but obviously the big production is gone. They bring in a couple of freshmen a couple of players from the portal who were at high-level programs but didn't see a lot of playing time. That's shooting guard Jarvis Moss from Stanford and combo guard Angelo Rizzi from Villanova. What do you think of Davidson last year? The one good thing you say about Davidson is they didn't turn the ball over last year. But man, they're losing over 30 points a game with just two guys. I don't know who's going to score in this team.
And another thing is that they didn't turn the ball over because they had Foster Lawyer. They had a 50-year point guard who played at Michigan State. That's been terrific for them. So to lose him, to lose Sam Menenga, just a mountain of a man inside to stop, who could step out and hit a three as well. Couldn't block any shots, but was certainly a guy that put up numbers and could rebound really, really well. He's like a Steven Adams light, almost, just with how big he is. Both from New Zealand, Australia, and just big guys that are hard to move down there in our load. So losing those two guys is going to hurt. I think losing Desmond Watson is big as well, because this isn't a team that athletically is going to be able to match up a lot of people. I think that's going to be a huge downside. And another thing is, it's probably going to be Angelo Brizzi that's going to step in and try and play the Foster Lawyer role and try and be the replacement at point guard here. And he didn't play his first year at Villanova, was seldom used to the point where he transferred mid-season last year. So athletically, I'm concerned here. I like the Matt Bob McKillop thing. They're going to be able to run a deliberate offense, and they're going to have to scheme up ways to score here because they are losing a lot. There's not a lot coming in. But with that being said, I feel like I know there's a certain floor, I guess, but how good their offense is going to be. But they're certainly going to be toward the bottom. The talent, the athleticism, question marks. There's just a lot. I feel like there's a lot of unknowns right now for this Davidson team. Right. Also in year two of Matt McKillop. Not feeling the greatest about the Wildcats right now. Also, I'm not feeling the greatest. Did you see they switched their logo?
No.
Oh my God, it looks horrific. It is one of the worst I've ever seen. It's so bad. It is so bad. It looks like it looks like Stony Brook's logo, just 50 times worse. It's horrible. It is I can't believe somebody made I think the Davidson logo they had, that Wildcat, was awesome. They changed the logo. It's absolutely horrific. Whoever did that should be fired. It's terrible. But that's beside the point.
You're cracking me up. Okay, so now we're getting down to the portion of the conference where actually we've been saying, this team's losing a ton, this team's losing a ton, this team's losing a ton. Now, a lot of the teams that finished at the bottom of the conference or the lower half of the conference are returning a lot of guys. And then we're going to start off with St. Joe's, who's kind of in the middle of the pack last year. The only player they lose is Ejike Obina, and they bring back Eric Reynolds, who's a Player of the Year candidate, a very athletic combo guard. He's the leading returner in the conference for three-pointers made with 99, and he shot 38% from deep. Also the leading returner free throw shooter in the conference at 88.5. They bring back wing Cameron Brown, point guard Lynn Greer, Kasper Klojic, a forward, comes back, and power forward Rasheer Fleming returns. And they had a very nice recruiting class led by point guard Xavier Brown, who was 164 in the composite rankings, also bringing in 3-star Sean Simmons, a forward, and another forward, Anthony Finkley. What do you think, Jake? This team's looking pretty good.
They certainly are. I think on paper, my God, Rich, this team is talented. They are. And you didn't even mention when you talked about who's coming in, they have a center named Christophe Essandoko, who's from France, who's going to step in and fill the Ejike Obina role. He was ruled ineligible last year, so he sat and he redshirted. And he's projected to be the starter for them. I mean, everything I've read from Billy Lang and the coaching staff and everyone who's gone to practice, any previews about this team, they love this guy. He's big. He can block shots, can pass a little bit. He's going to be, he's raw. And Billy Lang, one quote that stuck with me when he did an interview, he said, like, I acknowledge how hard it is to play Division I college basketball, but we think this guy can be pretty damn good. That's the one question mark you have. They don't have Ejike Obina. Okay, well, who steps in? And it's going to be Priest Essandoko. But they bring back their whole perimeter. You have Eric Reynolds. You have Cameron Brown, who at one point was shooting 45% from the three-point line last year. Now, of course, that tapered off because that's like a scorching hot mark to be at.
Mm-hmm.
But they bring back their 3 guards from last year, and that's absolutely huge in this conference. Lynn Greer had really, really big-time turnover problems early. He cleaned that up as the conference. And when they moved into conference play, he really, really cleaned that up, and that was big for him. So to bring back their perimeter is big. And then I think Eric Reynolds can be a player of the year guy. He was second team last year. I think he can be first team, potentially be player of the year if things break right and this team can stay healthy. Because you had Kasper Klojic, who as a stretch forward who can pass a little bit and shoot the 3. He missed some time with mono and was out for a while. Ejike Obina had some injury problems late in the season that forced Rasheer Fleming to step in as a true freshman and start at the 5. So, injuries is going to have to break their way, but man, this team is talented, Rich. Across the board, this team is talented. Whether you look at the returners, the freshmen they have coming in, Xavier Brown, Anthony Finkley from Philadelphia, both Roman Catholic guys from the Philadelphia Catholic League. I saw them both play in the Catholic League championship game against Newman Goretti. Xavier Brown banking in a 3 at the buzzer to send the game to overtime so Roman could win. Anthony Finkley, he's kind of like a combo forward. He looked like he was real comfortable with the ball in his hand, could shoot it a little bit, but as a big guy, was really comfortable handling the ball and passing as well. So across every single class, returners, freshmen coming in, there's a lot to like about this team. But here's my main question, Rich. Well, there's 2 actually. Defensively, this team wasn't great. Their defensive coordinator, so to speak, John Griffin III, took the head coaching job at Bucknell. But the main question here is, Billy Lang is 38-77 in St. Joe's through 4 years. The talent is there.
Mm-hmm.
He got a contract extension in the late spring, early summer. We're going to find out. I think this more so is a year that will reflect on Billy Lang than it will the players. The talent is here, and it is great. This is a very, very good St. Joe's team, potentially the best one in 5+ years. We're going to find out if Billy Lang can coach because he's got all the pieces here for sure.
Yep, I agree. Now we're going to talk about a St. Bonaventure team that had an off year for St. Bonaventure, but they don't really lose anyone of significance, and they're bringing in some big-time guards, but we'll go over who's coming back and who they're adding. Top of the list of who's returning is sophomore Jan Farrell. He is a solidly built wing / small forward, athletic, and he's also the conference's leading returner in 3-point percentage. Last year, he made 42% of his threes. Also coming back, shooting guard Daryl Banks, point guard Kyrell Luke, center Chad Venning, shooting guard Moses Flowers, and forward Barry Evans. So that's good. But what's even better is they bring in Charlie Pride, the shooting guard for Bryant, who can fill it up, and Micah Adams, a point guard from Cincinnati, who's been a solid floor general for that team for I think this is his graduate season, so I think 4 years. And then they also bring in the aforementioned Nola Brown from George Washington. I just want to talk a little bit about Pride and Adams. Pride is a 6'4" shooting guard. He has averaged double figures for 3 straight years. Last year, he averaged 14.6 points per game on excellent shooting splits, 45 from the floor, 37 from deep, 85 from the free throw line. Also chipped in 6.1 rebounds per game and 1.3 steals and 2.4 assists. And in terms of Adams, also a productive player, not as productive as Pride, but of course he played at a tougher conference. He has good size actually for a point guard at 6'3". He is a graduate player, so he is a super senior. He averaged 9.1 points per game. Shooting splits were solid: 43 from the floor, 37 from deep, 84 from the free throw line. And he chipped in 3.2 assists per game. So we have pretty much everybody coming back, plus these 2 talented guards.
I love this team, Rich. I love this St. Bonaventure team this year. You think about 2 years ago, and even 3 years ago, when there was that Bonnie's team that made the tournament as a 9 seed, and they lost to LSU. They had no depth. They played 5 guys.
Yes.
One of my favorite St. Bonaventure little anecdotes here is I went to watch them play LaSalle. It was right after New Year's during their COVID season. The year after they made the tournament, they brought everybody back. I think they started out as maybe number 21, ranked number 21 or 22. They still don't have any depth. They went on like a 17-day COVID pause. The last game they played was they were at UConn in Uncasville, Connecticut, playing at the Hall of Fame, or the Mohegan Sun. And they had a COVID pause after that. So they didn't play for almost 3 weeks. So they traveled to LaSalle. It's cold. It's right after New Year's. Their first game back against LaSalle, it was close. LaSalle made it close. Game went to overtime. Guess how many minutes the bench played that game?
The bench total?
Yes.
10?
3. In a game that went to overtime after an almost 3-week break, those guys played Dom Welch, Attaway, Oshuni, Lofton, and Jaron Holmes played all but 3 minutes of that game.
Wow.
And now you look at this team this year, Rich, they're going to have depth. They could go 8-9 guys deep.
Yeah.
And that's something that there's not many other teams in this conference that can do. Not to mention, I'm going to give you a take. I think Mark Schmidt is the best coach in this conference, X and O wise. X and O wise, there's not many. Maybe there's not 5 or 10 in all of America that could rival this guy. He is terrific. And you give him a team of returners. There's a lot of continuity. You give him a 1,500-point score at Bryant and Charles Pride, a point guard of Mike Adams-Woods who's got plenty of college experience, and a backup and a center in Noel Brown to back up Chad Bettinger, who they've seen playing conference. I love this team. I love the guards they have, Jan Farrell and Barry Evans as young guys that are now sophomores that can fill the cracks between your bigs and your guards here. And then you look at their guards, Kyrell Luke, a small, fast guy who can be a pest defensively. Daryl Banks and Charles Pride, who will be your scorers and the guys that you're going to rely on. Moses Flowers, who's going to be able to come off the bench as a guy that played at Hartford. He's going to be a bench scorer for you when you need some pop. And then, like I said, Mike Adams-Woods, a point guard that's probably going to start right away and push Kyrell Luke to the bench. The guy that played at Cincinnati and was very solid there and is probably going to produce more at this level. I love this team. I love the Bonnies this year. And Mark Schmidt's, they were competitive. They didn't finish last. I know it wasn't a great year for the Bonnies, but he had to throw together a roster. Daryl Banks from St. Peter's, Kyrell Luke from Holy Cross, Chad Benning from Morgan State, Moses Flowers from Hartford, brings in Farrell and Barry Evans, and they still were competitive and were a pretty solid team when he pieced together a team with low major players. I think Mark Schmidt is terrific, supremely underrated. I absolutely love this team this year, Red.
All righty. Now we'll talk about Richmond, but I don't know. There's not a lot of good news to say about Richmond. They were pretty much a one-man team last year. led by Tyler Burton, who has moved on to Villanova. And Tyler is a legitimate NBA prospect. So he moves on, and they also lose their other top three guys beside Burton in minutes played, and Andre Gustafson, Matt Grace, and Jason Nelson, who's going to VCU. Not a lot returning for this team, and probably the best thing you could say in terms of who's coming in would be freshman Trevor Smith, a point guard, top 200 recruit. But yeah, not a lot of bright spots here for Richmond.
Yeah, and it's a shame because I think the big story here really is not even players. It's coaching wise. Chris Mooney had a heart operation last year. They couldn't step away from the team late in the season, and they were struggling anyway. But that's bound to happen when you lose a Jacob Gilliard and you lose a Grant Golden and you lose some fifth and sixth year guys they won a tournament game with. So I believe Chris Mooney will be back, which is good news. He's a Philadelphia guy, played at Archbishop Ryan. How about this for a fact? I don't know how familiar you are with like the D2 and D3 scene in this area, but he actually coached at a school called Beaver College that's now Arcadia University. That's probably like 25, 30 minutes from me before it changed over names to Arcadia. So local guy to this area, and I think a damn good X's and O's coach too, and what he does at Richmond with the Princeton offense. But they're losing a lot, but they are bringing back a big center in Neil Quinn. Roche is coming back. The Jason Nelson thing sucks because not only is he transferring in conference rich to VCU, he's transferring like 10 minutes down the street to your freaking rival in the city.
Yeah.
I think some dirty business was going on there. Tyler Burton's a huge loss, a guy who I think me and you think that with a big year at Villanova can definitely make the pros and can give his draft stock a boost.
Yep.
And then Matt Grace and Gustafson were guys that had been there for a really, really long time. So having to replace that production and that experience is going to be big. Delani Hunt, I actually like a little bit. He lit for his Wagner team and himself lit up Temple last year, first game of the season, as Temple paid Wagner to show up there, and they took the money and they ran away with the W. But there's a lot on the way out here. Don't think the world of these guys that are coming in to just replace that right away. So I think it's going to be a down year for Richmond. I don't think they're going to be last in this conference, but they're certainly going to be toward the bottom. Not a whole lot to like here. Just hope that Chris Mooney can get back on the sidelines healthy.
Right. Agreed. All right, so now we're going to talk about LaSalle, and they lose their top scorer, Josh Nickelberry, shooting guard, moved on to Florida State, and of course the aforementioned Drame brothers who moved on to Duquesne. They do have Khalil Brantley coming back, and he chipped in. He actually was I was wrong. Nickelberry was the second leading scorer. Brantley was the leading scorer at 14.3 points per game, but not efficient. But a good rebounder and a good assist guy, also good steals. I might as well read off those numbers: 4.8 rebounds per game, 4.1 assists, and 1.6 steals. So a lot to like about Brantley. The other guys coming back: Jameer Brickus, a point guard; Deshaun Shepard, a wing; and Rokas Josias. Is that how you say it?
It's Yotsuits. I found out midway through the season.
How was it?
Yotsuits.
Yotsuits. Oh, goodness. Yeah. And he's a center. Unfortunately, in LaSalle, at least I am not aware of them adding anyone to get overly excited about, but Jake knows the team better than I, so I'm going to let you take over, Jake.
So they went the international route, adding 3 guys from overseas. They tried to be active in the transfer portal. They were in on a bunch of guys. Darion Prescott, who's a Philly guy from FIU, who didn't end up committing there, I think is at Coppin State. They were a finalist for Mac Etienne from UCLA, who decided to commit to DePaul.
Right.
They were in on a lot of guys. They were in early on Keyshawn Kelman from Princeton until he narrowed his list and they weren't on there. So they tried. It just didn't happen. And look, I went to LaSalle for a year. They were almost my alma mater before transferring 3 miles down the street to Temple. This is a hard place to win. Just is. Not a lot of resources here. They're trying to get a stadium renovation done. They've been on multiple presidents since I've been there, multiple athletic directors since I've been there. They just hired a new one about a month ago, Ash Purry from Villanova, who I think wants to get a stadium renovation done to continue to add to the program and give them some recruiting tools. But it's just a tough place to win right now. Just is. So they went the international route. So they bring in Milos Kovacevic. He played at Highland Community College in Illinois. F.A. Tamaz from Istanbul, Turkey. And lastly, Tunde Valberg Fasasi from Stockholm, Sweden, who played at the Husak School in New York. So they went the international route as opposed to trying to work the transfer portal, kind of zigging while everybody else is zagging, I guess. My problem with this team is they're losing their best shooter in Josh Nickelberry, and they're losing two everyday guys, I like to call it, that Fran Dunphy really likes in the Drame Twins. And with these international guys coming in, is that impact going to be felt right away? I think Tunde Valberg Basasi is a big forward who can do pretty much a little bit of everything on the floor, handling the ball, shooting it a little bit, putting the ball on the floor and getting to the basket. I think he could be a guy that plays a little bit. But there's a lot. There's guys going out, and even their starting center, Mamadou Doucouré, last year, who's a fifth year and graduated, he's on the way out. And it's like, we're bringing in, we have four guys on the way out. We really only have three coming in. And are they going to be impactful guys right away? However, I will say two very good guards on this team, Khalil Brantley and Jameer Breckus. Don't be scared off by the fact that these aren't two very big guys. There's some small guards, but what I say about them every time is good luck trying to stay in front of them. They got that ball on a string, their stop-start, their burst, their change of pace with the ball in their hands. They will get by you and make you look silly on a switch. And they can create for themselves. Jameer Breckus had a really good game at UMass where he went off in the second half. Khalil Brantley can get downhill. And even for a little guy, he's got some bounce to actually try and dunk one on your head. So I like what these guys bring offensively. This is just a team that's like, okay, besides them, they have Anwar Gill to back him up, but he's not a terrific shooter and has been prone to be turned the ball over quite a bit. Is there some backup creation on this team? Tayshaun Shepard really didn't play too much for Ashley Howard. He didn't really play for like the first third of the season. He gets inserted into the lineup, and he provides them with an athletic wing that they can play a little bit smaller and gives them some pop and some athleticism on the wing that they don't have. Can rebound very good as well. The guy to keep your eye on, though, Rich, is Rokas Yotsus, because they need size. They need somebody to step up. And although he's very raw, he showed the ability to shoot a little bit, can block some shots, can rebound. He's going to be the guy that's going to be tasked to step in and be the starting center on this team as a sophomore. And if you go back and you watch the film when he had to play at Dayton against Deron Holmes, he actually held his own and played pretty damn good. So as far as this team goes, I'm telling you, Rokas Yotsus is a guy to keep your eye on. This LaSalle team, though, I just don't know. Like, they didn't really add too much to where I don't really know what their ceiling is. Like, I don't think they're going to even surpass where they were last year. If they were 11 or 12, I think they're right at about that range.
Right.
Just because they really didn't add any proven commodities for you to get really excited about. They're just going to have to bring these young international guys along and see what you have.
Okay. So UMass is next on our list. Of course, Frank Martin's first year there wasn't very successful. A lot of, players. How would you describe it? I think he had a couple players, like leave mid-season, or I forget there was some drama there. But anyway, Frank Martin is probably not the easiest guy to play for. And so basically we have a house cleaning, and hopefully UMass really hasn't regained its glory from the Calipari days, and maybe Frank Martin could do that, but right now he's basically almost starting from scratch. Who they lose is point guard Noah Fernandez, who transferred to Rutgers, RJ Luis, who transferred to St. John's, Tafara Gapare, who was a highly regarded freshman, didn't play a ton, I don't believe, for Frank Martin. He's going to Georgia Tech. Wildens Levecki is going to Texas A&M. DeAndre Dominguez is going to Arkansas State, and TJ Weeks is going to Rider. Believe it or not, with all those guys leaving, they do have a couple of good players returning. One is sharpshooting wing Matt Cross, and also Rashul Diggins, who really has not yet to live up to his recruiting potential. He was a 4-star guy. He's a point guard, started off at Connecticut. Hopefully this is the year he breaks through. They also bring in one of the more highly ranked freshmen in the conference in point guard Jalen Curry, and they bring a super highly productive player, center Josh Cohen, who played at St. Francis last year, St. Francis in Pennsylvania. Josh is 6'10", 220. Last year, he averaged 22 points per game. He shot 59% from the floor. Really didn't make a three last year. Not really a three-point shooter. Shot 66% from the free throw line. He averaged 8.3 rebounds, 2.5 assists, and nearly a steal and a block per game, both 0.9 per game. So this is a highly efficient interior scorer, and so he should help balance out the talent they have at the wing and guard spots, but just not enough on this team yet for it to make any kind of impact.
No, and this is going to be an even lower finish than UMass had last year. I mean, this is a grocery list full of losses for this team. And they got drubbed in the first round. They played Richmond in the first round of the A-10 tournament, and like this wasn't even a game. They just got run over, and they got floored in this game. Lot of guys leaving. RJ Luis, very, very promising freshman who's now going to go play for Rick Pitino. I actually like the raw athleticism that Tafari Gapara had, who's now going to play for Damon Stoudemire, Georgia Tech. I think those two guys as young players, when you lose them, kind of stinks. But Matt Cross was good last year. At times this team was inconsistent. I saw them actually play Hofstra at the Barclays Center for the Hall of Fame Classic. True sicko game to be at, because it was the fourth game at like 9 o'clock on a Sunday of a quadruple header, and I still stayed there. And I walked right down to sit behind UMass's bench because I said I want to hear Frank Martin, yapping, and he's just screaming at guys the whole time. At times, I mean, if you're struggling and you're not doing your job, it's not going to be pleasant to play. I'll put it that way. He's very demanding, but also he's going to hold you accountable. I like that. But you better do your job or he is going to let you know.
This is a guy who took us unheralded South Carolina team to the Final Four not so long ago.
Right. So I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the way he coaches, but he's known to be very, very hard on his guys and hold them accountable when they're not doing their job.
Yeah.
But Matt Cross was a hustler when he was in there. He was a guy that, at least from what I saw, did not get yelled at often because he was doing his job. But the problem is he takes over UMass, has to get all these guys to gel, and a good chunk of these guys did stay. But he's going to be doing that again this year with a much younger team than he had last. So I think this UMass team is going to finish toward the bottom, if not at the bottom. They're going to be young. There's a lot of new faces that are going to have to gel here. And like you said, we're still waiting. Rashul Diggins, who was originally a top 100 guy at UConn, we're still waiting for him to hit a stride here near.
Right.
So yeah, this UMass team is going to finish probably a spot or two lower than they are now, even though they are pretty much at the bottom of the conference. Because this is basically a clean slate here for Frank Martin, you're told.
Yep. All right. Rhode Island is another team that loses a lot, and they were not very good. Once again, another team that used to be pretty much a powerhouse and as a mid-major, but they have fallen on hard times. They lose Ishmael Leggett, point guard to Pitt, Malik Martin, Brian Freeman is going to Coastal Carolina. Jalen Carey, believe it or not, is still in the portal. He was a top 100 guy at one point, but has never put it together either at Syracuse or at Rhode Island. Also, another top 100 guy, Alex Tichko, who didn't get a lot of playing time last year at Rhode Island for whatever reason. He came from Alabama. He is now headed to Detroit Mercy. About the only significant player was a high-level recruit last year, Brandon Weston. He's entering his sophomore season. Last year, Weston only averaged about 17 and a half minutes per game, wasn't efficient anywhere except for the free throw line. So he has a lot of room for improvement. Incoming is wing Zach Montgomery from Bradley and Jaden House from High Point. But basically, again, just like Massachusetts, probably even worse than Massachusetts, Rhode Island doesn't look to be competitive right now.
Yeah, I don't think so, because there's a lot of new guys that are coming in. And when they were as bad as they were last year, you do want to wipe the slate clean.
Right.
But their offense was really, really bad last year. This was one of the worst three-point shooting teams in America. They just wanted to put their head down, get to the rim, put pressure on the rim, and force you to foul them to get to the free throw line. Really didn't have too many guys with an outside shot at all. So they needed a real makeover. They're going to do that. They bring in some transfers: Zeke Montgomery, Lucas Courtwright, Jaden House from High Point are big guys to get. A name I really like on this team, they got a guy from, I believe it's Southeastern Oklahoma State. His name is Always Right. His last name is Wright, and his first name is Always Right. Yeah, what a name that is. Northeast Oklahoma A&M. Excuse me.
Any name I can pronounce, I'm all for it.
Well, you're not going to forget that one. I'll tell you that much. It's great. But the offense has to get better. The defense was there a little bit. They were feisty on the defensive end, but my God, this team was horrific offensively last year. 357th in effective field goal percentage, 343rd in 3-point percentage, 360th in block percentage on offense, because what they did, they drove in and they gave themselves up to try to get blocked, shots blocked.
Right.
Defensively, not awful. That was certainly the bright spot of this team, I guess. But offensively, things got to get better. And I think they'll be. I don't think they'll be 14th, but there's not going to be a complete ascension here. There's a lot of new faces coming in, and Ishmael Leggett, who pretty much was the best player last year, is now going to Pittsburgh. And then the Rayon Freeman situation wasn't good. He left the team, or was dismissed from the program late in the season, and then they played LaSalle in the first round of the A-10 tournament and kind of got smoked. So, much like UMass, it's almost like year one again for Archie Miller, because it's not like guys he's inheriting and just has to throw a roster together. He's doing it his way, and he's bringing in a whole bunch of new guys. So UMass and Rhode Island, especially, this is basically another rebuild.
Right. And I didn't mention this, but Carey, Freeman, and Leggett, the three guys that are transferring out, were the only three guys on the team who averaged at least 10 points per game. So, all right, now we're going to move on to the team that finished last in the conference. But I have a feeling this team is going to make a move this year, and that's Loyola Chicago, our darlings from the NCAA tournament. And the only guy they really lose is point guard Marquise Kennedy. They bring back point guard Brandon Norris, wing Ben Schweiger, forward Philip Alston, power forward Thomas Welch. By the way, he's the leading returner in the conference for field goal percentage at 66%. They also bring back wing Sheldon Edwards. And interestingly, they bring in two high-performing Ivy League transfers in center Dame Adelican from Dartmouth and point guard Greg Dolan from Cornell. They also bring in we mentioned before, Desmond Watson from Davidson, and freshman power forward Miles Rubin, who's a top 200 guy, 3-star guy. So I think Loyola has a lot to work with here.
Yeah, I think they will certainly get out of the basement and will finish in the top half of this conference. The problem last year was turnovers. And
right.
I think Drew Valentine's youth at the head coaching spot, being, I believe, the youngest in Division I in his second year, where he didn't have all those holdovers from Porter Moser and a ton of new players, that youth and experience on the coaching and in the personnel side kind of showed. And they turned the ball over a shit ton, and it wasn't pretty sometimes on offense. Felt like they got a little bit more athletic with Desmond Watson coming in. Damon Delican, a huge, monstrous center inside for Dartmouth that played Dartmouth last year, and I think will be productive in this conference and really give them a true center, because Tom Welch is more of a 4, and his field goal percentage was so high because he really didn't take too many shots outside the paint. So to now give them a real center, in my opinion, because Tom Welch can be a small ball 5, is more of a 4 in my opinion. But I like the returners as well. Like, you have Braden Norris, you have Greg Dolan, who played an up and down system at Cornell, will shoot a lot of threes, giving them another ball handler. But I tell you what, Philip Alston was awesome last year. After, how about this, playing 3 years at California University of Pennsylvania, now moved on to D1 at Loyola Chicago. He was terrific as a forward who could shoot the ball a little bit, a good athlete, a guy who could put the ball on the floor and get to the basket and really be a number 1 scoring option for them. So I like this team a lot. I felt like they got a lot better. They got themselves a good athlete in Desmond Watson, a good defender on the wing, another ball handler and point guard in Greg Dolan, a real center in Damon Delican to pair with these guys coming back. And I think Drew Valentine's got himself a good team that will certainly finish in that middle to top half of this league and will get out of the basement for sure.
All right. So we really, unlike probably most of our previews, we really, I'd say this is probably the closest bunch conference that we've talked about so far. So who's your pick, Jake? Who wins it?
I'm going to go with the Bonnies. A lot of people like VCU, myself included, but this team is deep. They have experience. They have scoring. They have a good big man in Chad Benning, who played very well last year coming over from Morgan State. I love the Bonnies this year. A lot of depth at guard, a lot of versatility with skill sets of the guards they have, and certainly a lot of scoring as well, and some forwards that I like in Barry Evans and Jan Farrell moving into their second year. And of course, like I can't sing the praise for Mark Schmidt enough. X and O wise, this guy's a nightmare to prepare for. Starting out games after timeouts, he'll draw up a set that you won't see it coming. He'll get him, and he'll get the Bonnies easy baskets. They will for sure be a top 3 team, barring a complete disaster. And I think people that have been saying, Dayton or VCU with a new coach, Dayton hasn't been able to get it done the last couple of years. I think this Bonnies team is kind of hiding in plain sight, and they're going to win the A-10 and go back to the tournament, which will be their second tournament in 4 years.
All right. I don't have a lot of confidence in my pick, and perhaps I'm picking a little bit with my heart here just because of what happened to them over the last 3 seasons, where they didn't get a chance to shine when they really had a loaded team. And then the last 2 years, they've kind of been hampered by injuries. Actually, yeah, that's been the main problem for them, I think, over the last 2 seasons. And that's Dayton. So I'm going to give them the nod over VCU. But as I said, I see this conference very, very close. And I think Duquesne is going to be there. I think St. Joe's is going to be there. And your Bonnies are going to be there. And I think Loyola Chicago has a chance to be there. So, yeah, I think it's going to be a tight race for the top. And I think there's going to be 6 really good teams in this conference. But I'm going to give the nod to Dayton. As I said, that might be just a little bit picking with my heart. So how many teams make the NCAAs?
So I certainly think the Bonnies will be there. But here's the thing, like, this used to be a league that could get 3 to 4 teams in.
Yeah.
Was certainly not that last year. And the year before, I know they had Davidson and Richmond, I think 2 or 3 years back.
Mm-hmm.
It's not quite that anymore. I think VCU will get there as your second team, though. Of course, that Joe Bombasile waivers, it's going to be big. But I think VCU gets there as the second team. I think the Bonnies will win the conference tournament, but I think those VCU Rams will have a good non-conference slate and will be able to not coast in this conference, certainly, because I think it'll be a lot better than it was last year. Mm-hmm. But I think VCU and Ryan Odom's a terrific coach. He will show that and shut anybody up that doesn't think that. And VCU will sneak in as that second team.
Right. Yeah, I think this conference is pretty much a lock to get to. Of course, my picks would be Dayton and VCU right now. But I just, the other teams I mentioned, Duquesne, St. Joe's, St. Bonnie's, and possibly even Loyola Chicago, I think that whoever emerges as the second best team is probably going to be tournament worthy. I wouldn't be surprised if and certainly if one team does end up dominating this conference and then they lose in the conference tournament, I think that team will still get in. So I think 2's a lock. 3, maybe, but I'm saying 2 right now. All right. So who do we have for Conference Player of the Year, Jake?
So I'm banking on the health of St. Joseph's, and I'm going to bank on Billy Lang really turning this thing around now that he's got all his guys there. I'm going to go with Eric Reynolds because for the second year in a row, I feel like I could just say, oh, it's Deron Holmes. I think Dayton's going to be good, and he's probably the best player and the best pro prospect in this conference. I'm going to go Eric Reynolds. He's an absolutely dynamic wing scorer, really, really good shooter, can fill it up on some nights and can really get up to the 40-point range if he's knocking them down. So especially that experience with Cam Brown, with Eric Reynolds, with Lynn Greer, their second year, they're playing with each other. I think the St. Joe's team, like I said, some things have to break their way. They got to stay healthy. And Billy Lang really has to have a year that we think he can have with the talent on this team. But if St. Joe's becomes a potential top 5 team, maybe a team that's 3 or 4, and Eric Reynolds has a good year like I know he will jump up from being on the second team last year to the first team, and he will be the player of the year in this conference. If you don't know him already, you're going to know his name this year because I think he'll be a whole lot better. He'll be covered a lot more. And you're going to see just how good of a scorer this guy is.
Yes. All right. So Eric Reynolds, to me, the decision came down to the 2 guys you picked, Deron Holmes and Eric Reynolds. I'm going to go with Holmes. He has the inside track right now based on, the overall metrics and so forth, but certainly Eric Reynolds has a shot. And I'm going to name one dark horse, and that's Max Fiedler from VCU coming in, replacing Ace Baldwin, who was the player of the year last year in this conference and the defensive player of the year in this conference. What a catch for Penn State. So Max Fiedler, I think, is going to get a little consideration, but I think it comes down to Holmes and Reynolds. I'll give the nod to Holmes, but I think either guy could do it. All right, so that wraps up our show, Jake. Well done, sir. It was great to talk to you about the A-10 because I know it's a conference that is especially close to your heart, and you know that conference probably as well as anybody in the country. So that's always fun to listen to you ramble on. So it was fun. And so next episode, folks, as a reminder, by the way, this was our second episode this week. So we split NBA and World Cup into one episode and these conference previews into another episode. And the next show we're going to be doing in about 10 days or so, we're going to be previewing the Mountain West Conference, the West Coast Conference, and the Sun Belt Conference. Yeah, we're getting down there, Jake. We're getting down there. And then after that, we're going to move into the real biggies, like the ACC, Pac-12, SEC, and so forth.
Yeah, we're only looking at about 60 some days, if that, until college basketball starts. So
yeah,
it'll be in football on last night, but hey, it's got, like, you look at the calendar and it's like time's ticking here. We're almost there.
NBA training camps start in less than a month.
Yeah, basketball is it's a great time to be a sports fan right now. Baseball is going to be in playoffs. Hockey's going to start. College football has already started. Pro football is going to start. You'll have the basketball start. It's a good time.
Baseball playoffs are coming up.
Exactly. So great time to be a sports fan right now. Everything's almost in full swing.
And then you forgot my secret love, not so secret love, F1 racing. That will be winding up too.
When are they going to Vegas?
It's a few weeks from now, maybe a month. Actually, I mean, the season for F1 is pretty much wrapped up. It's more the drama is like who's going to finish second. But Max Verstappen has in Red Bull. Red Bull looks like they're going to win it as a team. Max Verstappen. I mean, he's won 10 races in a row. He just set a record. It's a record. So yeah, he's running away with it, and he's my boy. He's my boy. Here's my Red Bull hat.
There you go.
All right. So you are correct. A great time for sports. Good show, Jake. We'll see you in a little over a week.